Ever. Okay. Hello, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
Good. We are going live right now. This is All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. We are here again another week. This is May 6th, and it is the Friday before elections. We have been covering the elections all election season long, and now this is the final stretch of these Newark municipal elections here, and we have the honor to talk to Chigozie Oneyma of the West Ward, running to be council person for the West Ward, and because we are interviewing, and just for a rundown of the show before we jump into the interview, we are going to be interviewing the different candidates tonight for the West Ward. We have scheduled Chigozie right now. We have Lavita Johnson on and Oscar James on a little later. We also at 6:50 we're going to have the ACLU on talking about weed and giving money back for the things that for disproportionate impacts on our communities. And at 7:15 we're going to have the State of Hip Hop with DJ Rhino, and we're going to have our guest Hakim Greene on talking about some what is that state? Different albums came out. We're going to have a big conversation about that with Chris Randall as well. And we are also going to have at 8 o'clock the Donald Payne cannot make it tonight, and so we are going to have Larry Ham talk to us and continue the conversation of last week about Gary then and now. It's going to be a fascinating interview. So we're going to jump right into this because we know we have limited time, and Chigozie, we know that your time is limited as well. So first, welcome back to All Politics Are Local.
Thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure to meet you, brother Chris. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
And we can just jump right into the interview, right? We have only a limited amount of time. So first thing is, we talked to all the candidates about what about their biography made them the candidate to run. We asked you about that last time. Is there anything that has changed or anything you've learned between the time you started running and now that would modify that answer?
Yeah, so I mean, we certainly still think that we're the most qualified candidate in the race. And I think what we shared before around qualifications is that, education matters, credentials matters, but what's most important is how we use what we learn to serve people, right? And I think that we've used quite a bit of what we learned to serve people. I think I shared before that, when I first came out of law school, the first thing I worked on was a ban the box ordinance at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. And our hope was to remove the box on these employment applications where folks are asked whether they have criminal convictions, because the whole hope is that we want to make sure that our brothers and sisters who are returning home from prison have meaningful opportunities to be reintegrated into society. And a core piece of that is making sure that they have a good job. So that's something that we worked on and something that we were really passionate about. And I think also, we've done quite a bit more. I mean, I think when President Trump tried to undercount Black and Latino communities, that's something that we also fought back against. We created the West Ward Complete Count Committee to ensure that communities all over the West Ward are counted. And I think oftentimes when we think about immigrant communities, we only think about sort of the Ironbound and the North Ward, but really Ivy Hill has one of the largest immigrant communities in the city of Newark. And it's also the place that my family first came when we came to this country. So, we certainly think that credentials matter, but we also think that how we serve people matters the most.
And interesting, when you were talking about our perception of the immigrant community, I remember we're doing the Association of Undocumented Americans, and we didn't realize that there were so many Haitian students at Central High School, right? And in the Central Ward. So so what you're saying is in terms of just who we think of as immigrants goes through. So here's the second question: we've had the candidates on. We have talked about crime in the West Ward. I grew up in the West Ward. I'm from the West Ward. Went to Mount Vernon Elementary School. So I've looked at this race, and I've followed this race because I lived there, most of my life, right? Driving down South Orange Avenue in the middle of the day, and I see a car doing donuts in the middle of South Orange Avenue, right? The South Orange Avenue, main street, main thoroughfare. Everyone just stopped, right? Everyone just stopped, slowed down the cars, and, waited till they finished doing the donuts with a presumably stolen car and just kept on our business. There are people who have been reporting about lots of crime, getting beat up. One of our council candidates was robbed just 2 weeks ago. when we're talking about crime in the Central Ward, right? What is your vision of what public safety should be, and what would you advocate for? Especially because we're also, we don't want our communities over policed, but at the same time, we don't want our old people, we don't want people to be victims, our kids to be victims of crime. What is your perception and vision of that?
I think it's a great question. I think that, when we think about the communities that experience the least amount of violence, I think one thing they have in common is that they're well-resourced, right? So we know that the communities that have the most resources experience the least crime, experience the least violence, and in many respects have some of the least challenges when it comes to that. So we think we want to build some resources in our community. We want to make sure that people have people's material needs are met, right? So we think that one way to deal with crime is to build more affordable housing. We think we need a significant amount of affordable housing, not only in the city of Newark, but specifically in the West Ward. The crime report talked about 16,000 units and about 3,500 of those being in the West Ward. And so that challenge is pretty acute where we are. So we want to do that. We want to make sure that folks have access to healthcare. We want to make sure that people have access to social services. And we also want to make sure that the young people who are creating some of these challenges also have access to recreational opportunities, some structured programming, that the schools are meeting their needs. So we think that any sort of response to crime has to be holistic. We think police have a role to play, but we think the most significant role is to improve the material conditions of the people in our ward, and to lift the standard of the quality of life for folks in the ward as well. So that's kind of how we're going to try to approach crime. We're going to come at it from a holistic angle and try to deal with some of the root challenges, while we also deal with the branches of it, which I think police kind of help us deal with those branches.
Chris, Randall, do you have a follow-up question on the issue of criminal justice?
Well, first of all, it's good to meet you, brother. I appreciate you. I got to ask you about that library behind you, because I just feel like you got some gems back there that I might need. I love the nerd energy that you're giving me right now.
Yes, sir. I love to share, brother. I'd love to share.
But for me, I guess my fundamental question is, how do you? Because we've known for some time that social scientists have known that how we construct communities and what resources communities have determines what they'll do, right? I believe it's B.F. Skinner who says, if you let me control the environment of a child, I can give you any child you want, paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. What do you think it is? Is it just simply a question of resources? Or do you think that there's also like some endemic internal emotional issues that certain communities have to heal from in order to be healthy? Which one do you think it is? Is it just purely like, if we resolve sort of resource disparities, we can solve these problems? Or is it another question of, we have to do other things in order to create that?
Yeah, I think it's a both and. I think that the resource question is critical, and I think it's fundamental, right? So I think it's necessary, though not sufficient. So if we don't address the resource issue, I don't think we can effectively address the overall challenge. But I also think that there's something else that's happening, right? I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with our communities, right? I think that the challenges that we experience are social, meaning that they're created by the challenges that we have in our community. But the reality is that young people, adults are experiencing these things, and it's shaping how they behave. And so we also have to deal with the kinds of trauma, the kinds of different challenges that folks experience, and make sure that they get the help that they need, whether that's therapy, or whether that's some other sort of cognitive behavioral treatment. But I don't think that alone resolves the challenge, right? So I think if we don't deal with the fundamental social issues that we have, right, the fundamental wealth disparities, the fact that many people cannot afford to pay rent, if we can't deal with the fact that many people in our community don't have high quality health care, if we don't deal with the fact that environmental racism also produces a form of violence called asthma, right, which kills people too, if we don't deal with all of these challenges and we don't think about violence holistically, I don't think we get there, So I don't think it's like something that's inherently wrong with our community. I think that there's social conditions that create those challenges. I think we have to resolve those social conditions at the same time as we deal with the ways those social conditions have already impacted so many in our community.
So if I could just push it a little bit, it's kind of one of the phrases I like. The thing that I think this is what was interesting. It's just me and you here, candidate. We're gonna act like Jonathan Alston not here. It's just me and you, okay? One of the things that I was telling them about a few weeks ago is that when we would talk about drill music, hip hop music, and in a different way, like street rap, as what Pusha T would call it. I think that those things exist to narrate the realities of people who are pushed into certain circumstances. how do we adequately address those questions, right? And how can we utilize the sort of creations of our community, i.e. music, culture, all those things, to talk about it? Because for me, when I was really young and I believe I was in middle school the first time I read it, The Diary of Anne Frank. I don't think that there's really a distinction sometimes between the way we think about certain branches of hip hop and that sort of thing. Like, we're just narrating the kinds of conditions that we're being subjected to. Where do you fall on some of these questions?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the drill music reflects the community and the experience that folks have, right? So I think that, if folks have negative experiences, I think the music will reflect that. At the same time that happens, I also think that we don't have meaningful control over the kind of music that folks hear. So I don't think that what we hear on the radio, what we see on television reflects like what everybody wants to listen to. I think it reflects what a select group of people want to put out there and believe that they can sell. So I think capitalism also impacts our music. But I think, I've heard I think I want to say it was Eric Adams talking about drill music. And I think, dealing with drill music is one thing, but I think you have to deal with what produces drill music, right? And I think that's the same thing with violence. Like, dealing with the shooting that happened and sending police over there to resolve it is important, right? I think it is something that we have to do. But I think if you don't think about the root cause of any of these things, I think you're just going to deal with the same challenge. And I think that, I think we need a positive culture as well. I think people need to see, an alternative, and I think it's our job to build that alternative. And it's our job as council people to build that alternative. I think it's our job as artists to build that alternatives. And I think we all create art in everything that we do, right? I think the way that we sort of, I think about electoral politics. I think, the speech that we give is art, right? The way we debate is art. Well, the kinds of the stories that we tell ourselves are art, right? So I think we have to tell better stories about what's causing the challenges in our community and how we fix them as well. So I think art plays a significant role.
Going to this next question, and this will be the last basic question that we ask you, because we are running short on time. But the second large issue that took place in the West Ward, and one that people talked about a lot, was just the litter, the garbage, the housing, right? Like how certain houses are almost junked. What is your perception of just the sanitary needs in the West Ward, and what is your policy prescription on how to deal with that? And especially in terms of housing, like certain houses being abandoned, certain houses being like litter in the house itself from being abandoned. What is your vision of that? What is your vision of how to change that?
Yeah, I think any of us who are running for office, what we end up doing is we knock on tons of doors, right? Me and my campaign, we've knocked on thousands of doors, and I think in that process, you see the built environment of the city, right? You walk down these blocks, many of which are devastated, whether it's abandoned homes, whether it's trash everywhere. So we certainly see the nature of that challenge, and I think it's a couple things that I think we need to do. One, I think that when we talk about the vacant and abandoned lots, we have to find a way to get those lots back on the tax rolls. And the reality is that the city owns or controls a significant number of those lots, right? Whether that's through the city's land bank or the city's Department of Economic and Housing Development. And I think that we have an opportunity to make sure that Newark residents benefit from those vacant and abandoned lots, not only in terms of making sure that the neighborhood looks better, but also in terms of us building wealth at the same time. So that means we need to use our redevelopment agreements to connect current residents to some of those properties. And we also have to figure out how we can create funds, resources, so that people can borrow, so people can get the money that they need in order to fix those houses, right? And we have a strategy that we want to implement if we're fortunate enough to be successful to do some of that. We don't think that we'll get through hundreds of units, hundreds of lots at a time, but we do think we can get through dozens. And if it proves that it works, we think we can bring in some more resources to scale it up. But in terms of just the question of trash, I think I think the city has to do a better job, but I also think we as a community have to do a better job, right? So I think it's making sure that we clean up in front of our homes. It's making sure that we move our cars so that street sweepers can go through. It's also making sure that the folks who are picking up trash, pick up all the trash and don't leave more trash than they pick up. Because I know oftentimes when I look in front of my home, every time trash is picked up, I got to do a pretty decent job cleaning up as well. So we want to make sure the city's doing what they need to do. And I also think that the council person is important for another reason, because I think that, when you have a council person with a strong voice, I think those council people, their wards tend to get more attention, right? So I think we need somebody in the West Ward who has a much stronger voice. I don't think we've had a strong voice in a while. So I think that's important. And the same way that a strong voice matters for awards, strong voices matter inside neighborhoods and in blocks. That's why we want to rebuild some of these block associations and also strengthen our neighborhood associations so that, they can have a stronger voice around what they need. Organized community is much more likely to get attention than a disorganized community. So we want to make sure that we start organizing from the ground up, not start, but continue organizing from the ground up in the West Ward.
You're on mute, Jonathan. You're on mute.
Do you have a question? Do you have a follow-up question on the issue of sanitation and just the sanitary conditions that exist in the West Ward? Any follow-up on that?
My question, I'm sure the candidate knows, like, I'm a huge Robert Bullard fan. He was the person who I read that kind of brought me into consciousness about environmental racism. How do we educate people about why they're in certain conditions? And then how do we then mobilize that re-education program to explain to people what they need to be organizing around in order to push forward?
Yeah, I think one, public schools matter, right? So I think that we need to make sure that our public schools curriculum reflect the kind of things that we want our young people to learn. And that's something that's, I guess, a macro level piece. But I also think the kind of social programs that we build are important too. So as city council person, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have young people reading certain books. Literacy programs are really important for me. I think so often when we think about literacy, we think of literacy versus illiteracy, right? Which is reading versus an inability to read. But really, we have to think about literacy versus illiteracy, because a lot of people can read but choose not to. And we need folks to kind of see the importance of literacy because, ultimately, you can't talk to everybody that you want to engage, but you certainly can read their work. And we want young people thinking about, their community in a much more thoughtful way. So I think, building book clubs, building different using our rec centers to build more creative programming, right? I think sports are important. I think, physical activity is critical, but I also think the arts are critical. And I think that the kind of cultural programs that we build are critical. We need young people thinking about plays and acting and music and really just the entire gamut. And so I think our cultural programs have to do some of that work as well. And I think on a basic level, we also got to just organize people against what we don't want. And I think that's an education in itself. If Passaic Valley Sewage is trying to build another power plant in trying to build a facility in the East Ward, and we want to organize against it. Organizing people against that is an education unto itself, right? Because to fight against something, you have to understand it. So I think we get people to understand that piece and to fight against it, and also let people know that environmental racism doesn't know ward boundaries. That's politics. Environmental racism in the East Ward affects people all throughout the city and people beyond our city as well. So we got to get people to think, to recognize that if they're trying to put that in the East Ward, West Ward residents got to show up and protest as well. And that's something I've been fundamentally opposed to for quite some time. So
you can't throw away the table and keep the chairs.
That's right.
I guess the last question I would have on this question, sort of, because I think this is one of my things. Yes. I've been reading a lot of Albert Clegg lately because of Dr. Earl Fisher and a bunch of other people. And I've been thinking about it this way. How do we mobilize like faith communities, institutions like the church, et cetera, to engage in these things? Because whether people like to think about it or not, those are still some of the more powerful institutions in our community. So how do we mobilize those people to be more politically active while they're saving souls spiritually?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think that so we know that they need to be more politically active, and I think the question around how, I think we got to talk to some of these the folks who lead these faith institutions and talk to them about how critical it is that they participate in transformation, not just inside their church but inside the community. And I think one of the challenges to that is that though we might have some decent sized churches in Newark, all the residents who attend that church don't necessarily live in the city anymore. So folks live sort of in the greater Newark area too. But I think that they have a really strong role to play. But the question of how is a difficult one, and I'm not 100% sure. But I know that I'll begin with trying to pull some of these faith leaders together and then sort of try to create a vision around what we think they can do, whether it's around violence, whether it's around jobs, whether it's around the quality of life, and whether it's around just making sure that folks know what's happening, keeping folks informed. Because there's so few spaces where people are literally seated for 2 hours and you can potentially politicize them, introduce them to different ideas, connect what's happening in our community to what's happening to their faith tradition. So I think that they're a very underutilized institution. The question of how, though, is a difficult one.
You're muted again, Mr. Austin.
Thank you so much. We always have a last question that we ask. And our last question is always, this is the last question we asked you last time. And you can modify it, right? Like,
just know that I'm willing to judge you, sir. I'm willing to. I sent you a Facebook friend request. I'm willing to rescind it. I reserve the right to judge you.
I'm gonna accept it before we get off this.
I reserve the right.
No, don't worry. We're gonna answer right.
I reserve the right.
Well, the thing is, he already answered the question before, but he could remind us what our answer was and just tell us what and have a choice of who you're rocking with now, or who or what song or what individual best represents what you think about your campaign.
Oh, okay, that's different from before. I think before was like my
favorite hip hop artist, individual, or group, right?
What's your favorite hip hop artist, individual? Let me go click the Facebook then. Go ahead.
My favorite artist.
So answer that question first. Who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual, or group? And then come into the what is who do you think best represents your campaign? It's your choice in terms of.
Yeah, I'll do both. Favorite artist is Jay-Z.
Okay, you good. You good with me? Okay, I'm gonna keep. Okay, request still sent. Okay, good. All right.
There you go. Good. And in terms of what artist represents my campaign best, I'll pick Nipsey Hussle. I think there's an entrepreneurial spirit to his music. I think there's a social consciousness to it. I think there's an aesthetic that's also that's appealing and it's dope. And I think that there's the consciousness isn't so heavy that it beats you over the head, but it's inviting so that you want
palatable to our community, right?
An opportunity to and he sort of creates more music for you to kind of learn a little bit more. So I think Nipsey.
All right, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on.
Chris Randall, did that meet your standards?
Chris Randall, did he meet the standards?
Yeah, you did all right. You did all right. Now there's somebody on the screen. I'm not gonna tell you who it is, candidate. I ain't gonna tell you who it is, but there's somebody on this screen who thinks that a particular rapper from Marcy Projects, doesn't glorify any kind of ratchet behavior. I ain't gonna say who it is.
Jay-Z is amazing. His work is layered.
Somebody said,
"Come on, man! It's not just you read it." He says Jay-Z and Pusha T are like the same. We're gonna be talking about that later in the broadcast.
I'll try to listen in.
Slander of Jay-Z later in the broadcast. That's what we're gonna be doing later in the broadcast.
You a Jay-Z fan? How many people can say they got 3 Jay-Z features?
How many people can say they got 3?
3 Jay-Z features. Not named Kanye West.
Signed to his label?
Yeah, not named Kanye West. I know one.
I know you're gonna say Pusha. I'm trying to think of who else. I can think of 2 for a lot. Scarface got a couple. Yeah, I can think of 2. I can't think of the third.
Kanye's got a whole album. I'm just saying, you got a whole duets.
Well, I'm just saying.
R. Kelly.
Oh, we can't.
Not to say, look, I'm not supporting the brother. I'm just saying, if you're thinking about an artist,
supposed to say
you're supposed to say he who should not be named from Chicago.
Right.
Should not be named from Chicago. We'll
go but the conversation, you'll see it later. But the conversation essentially is that, and that's why I asked you the question, is that I feel like it is hard for me growing up. I'm from Baltimore originally, which is Newark's brother community. There wasn't like a transition. Not like I moved from Baltimore to Newark and was like, oh, this is so hard. I have no idea how to navigate this community. You know what I'm saying? So, but what I would say is it's hard for me listening to certain things to not hear the layers that are present, to not hear the different, like when you listen to Nipsey, right? The kinds of things he's talking about is extremely layered.
Right. But I know that Chigozie has a lot of his schedule is busy. This is going to be a busy weekend for him. That's the Mother's Day push, everyone's going to be at church Sunday. Everybody's going to be at church Sunday, buttering up the mamas for the vote on Tuesday.
Emphasis on the push. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So we wish you luck. You can tell people who to vote for and what the number and letter are.
Sure. Vote Chigozie Oneyma. My ballot position is 5C. Election day is Tuesday, May 10th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Also, where can people follow you on social media?
My first and last name, which I think is in the in the corner here, and it's an underscore after that on Instagram, and then my first and last name on Facebook. I do not have a Twitter just yet. But
got it.
On both.
Well, good luck, candidate.
All right,
I appreciate it.
And whatever happens on Tuesday, we definitely want to have you back. One thing good about this race is there are a lot of different candidates that know a lot and would love to have conversations with, all the other stuff. So either way, we're going to have you back on our show. Good luck.
I appreciate that for sure. Thank
Good
you so
luck,
much.
sir.
All right, take care.
All right.
All right, man. That is All Politics All Local. We had the other two scheduled, and I know Lavita Johnson is not feeling well, and I know Oscar James I just got a text from Oscar James, and he is not going to be available as well. He has something that he's doing. So we are in right now. We were talking about before, right? You were talking about some things, and I do want to just extend some of the things from the conversation we were just having, because I just think it was valuable. And you were talking about dealing with some of those issues in more substantial ways than
refresh my memory, sir. What issues?
Yeah, you were like, when we're looking at this music, when we're looking at issues of like drill music, and people talk about that, right? There's almost seems to be a generational gap, and you're describing like a consciousness gap almost, right? In terms of the people who hear it and what it means. Older people, it triggers in a certain way to think, oh, what's going on with these young people, for many younger people. And depending on even the younger people, right? It triggers different ways. People have different reactions to it. And I think you were reacting strongly to that then. And if you want to elaborate on that with regard to this previous conversation. Because we're talking about crime, we're talking about...
I'm gonna push a little bit of that for later when Hakim Greene and DJ Rhino are here. But what I would say is this. It's easier to rebuke the music that comes from the ethos of the street than it is to rebuke the people who created those conditions. I will never forget where I was when I watched a particular politician from South Carolina, after delivering the Democratic nomination for president over to a person who crafted the most nefarious, in my opinion, the most nefarious piece of political legislation in at least the last 50 years, the 1994 crime bill, handing the Democratic nomination over to that person and saying they didn't want anything in return. We seem to forgive all of those things, rationalize it. We can say, oh, well, you weren't there. You don't know what the communities were up against. You have no idea what you're talking about, how bad. You don't have any idea how dangerous the streets were in the 90s, et cetera, right? But when it comes down to particular kinds of art that come from people who look like me, and when I say look like me, I mean literally from a pigment standpoint, also from a gender standpoint and a performance standpoint, there's a inability to empathize with those things. And in fact, what we do is demonize and pathologize those things. Even when it is written with an amazing lyrical content, with extreme mastery of the language, with the underlying intent to take you into the psyche, the sights, the smells, the energy around particular behaviors, nefarious or not. And I find I'm resentful of that.
So it's being resentful of the overall context of people, almost like you're saying, belittling.
Yes, it's like when something that I'm sure is deeply traumatic in a bunch of ways becomes just a 40-year-old rapping about selling drugs, 40-year-old millionaire rapping about selling drugs. It's like, that can't be all you heard. And if you do, I don't think you would say that in other situations.
Right. And that's what we're going to be talking about later tonight, like at 8:15, after the ACLU comes on. That will be definitely we're getting fully in to that particular topic. When we're shifting gears, right? Let's shift gears.
I'm right here. Whatever you need, I'm here for you.
Yeah, let's shift gears to some cultural commentary, right? like I'm looking through Facebook, looking through different social media, and there've been a lot of deaths this week, and there was some interesting celebration going on in one of
Always
those.
cool to celebrate when a black man died.
So, talk to me. I know you feel have some strong feelings about this. I am not familiar with the controversy in that way. I know that your feelings about this are strong. So what's going on, Chris Randall? What's going on, man?
So there is a pretty famous, for whatever reason, controversial YouTuber named Kevin Samuels who passed away. Had some pretty strong feelings as it related to the reasons why Black relationships and Black families were not as united as they once were, particularly from your parents' generation and even yours, right? And one of the things he stood on consistently was, if you look at, we can talk, like paraphrasing, he would say things like, we can certainly account for white supremacy, i.e. slavery, Jim Crow, whatever. But he would say, we got married through slavery. We got married during Jim Crow at a level of 80%. And now here we are with more wealth, more education, more access than we've ever had. And yet our families are in certain conditions. And why is that? And one of the major reasons that he highlighted, which I think is the number one reason why he was unpopular in life, and by he, I mean the person who passed away, Kevin Samuels, why he was so hated was that he even sought to imply that the whims, ideas, preferences, and realities of Black men, A, mattered, right? And B, what kinds of relationships are sustainable given the reality of everything that Black people have had to navigate. How do we have and create peaceful, loving relationships? And one of the major things he said is we have to have realistic kind of conversations. We have realistic kind of conversations about what we desire, what we think we should have access to, who we think our partners should be, and how we expect our partners to behave. And unfortunately, if there's one thing about this person where his life reality and then even posthumous slander to the point of people celebrating that he died, having not killed anybody, hurt anybody, been accused of any serious crime or any of that, is that I think it's something that I don't see myself ever having access to, is that he expected his opinions and statements to be heard and actually reacted to and critically analyzed based on what he actually said and the empirical reality of what he was speaking of, and that never happened.
So to put it in a much more, maybe in a blunt way, is what you're saying is that his entire position is based on there being, like, Black men are incarcerated, killed at high rates, and if you're talking about dating, that's the
macro level, but also in a micro level, silenced, slandered, shamed, ignored, guilted, right? And those things don't ever get discussed. And in fact, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson was someone he consulted consistently about whether his positions on Black men were correct or incorrect from an empirical standpoint, somebody you and I both know. To make that more of it from Fresno State, a professor of African American studies at Fresno State who specializes in Black male studies. He actually was on the T. Hassan Johnson podcast, and per both of them, he had a relationship where Dr. T. Hassan Johnson was educating him about what the realities of Black male studies were saying about the conditions of Black men, and he absolutely spoke from that perspective. But whether people agreed with him or not, the problem was, because he was who he was as a Black man speaking about these things, his opinions were completely ignored and sensationalized so that they could be ignored, not actually taken to task for what they were.
So, and the big difference you're saying is between the well, here's a question, right? Mm-hmm. Wasn't his audience, like, I've never seen an entire broadcast. I've only seen certain things, but wasn't his broadcast, what were the demographics of his broadcast? Was it broadcast to Black men?
Well, he spent the first part of his career talking to black men, and then he spent the latter years of it, up until his death, I believe it was like 24 hours ago, speaking to women. And he would say, if you believe you're going to have certain kinds of partners, who are you in terms of being able to access that? What do you represent? Who are you that pushes you in a particular direction to make you believe that all of us have to date this person? All of people would come in and they would be of different ages, different groups, different socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever, but they would all say, I need to be dating a black man who makes six figures. And Mr. Sanders would say things like, well, is this percent of black men make that much money? But what kind of person is that person going to want to date? Is it you? And at the point where he would say things like, black men are not second-class citizens. We have rights too. We have preferences too. We have ideas too. We have realities about our history and realities about our reality that we think are important, that we think should be recognized as well.
So it's interesting because what you're talking about also seems to be like, and this is something I knew it was like this, like every like year, 6 months, there's another like battle of the genders in terms of black men and black women relationships that starts coming up. I know that he was involved in that. What you're saying is that he actually had academic backing. There was, whether you agree with him or don't agree with him, he was making coherent arguments that were ridiculed and that were caricatured.
Right.
Was any of that based on affect? Was any, because the little that I saw, like, he seemed like he could be a little rude, right?
So here's the triggering part for me, Mr. Austin. And you and I, as two people who worked together for a long period of time, we've had heated discussions before, right? But if you ask me a question and my response is, you're effing trash. Or you ask me a question and my response is to question your sexuality, even under the rules that is a negative thing, right? Under the auspices that that's a negative thing. That, if I'm
so you're saying that is things that would happen. Like,
yes, of course.
Like, so he would say something that was not necessarily inflammatory, and then the response would be to question his sexuality or to say that or to literally call him trash, like to engage in just name calling.
For sure. And you could go on social media any time of the day and see pictures of him taken out of context. And it would be very homophobic slurs over the pictures and say, what kind of man would take advice about being a man from this person? Things that would not be acceptable if they were done in reverse. And so I think that is the fundamental place where we are. I think that what he highlighted for many, particularly very young black males and males between, say, 25 and 40, was that the acceptable performance of your masculinity are this: silence, acquiescence, right, or outright death. And if you don't want to be in one of these three boxes, you are now toxic.
And so that's interesting. So you're saying that, like, when people are talking about the YouTube commentary, when they're talking about the general, often very highly disrespectful behavior that happens on social media in general, if he's in these conversations, it's almost like you're saying it's like it became the Jerry Springer show, but we're only looking at one side as being violent.
For sure. The thing that's interesting is, I'll give you an example. I remember a few years ago when Jay-Z was assaulted in the elevator by Solange. Here's a man 6'2", curled up in a ball like this, being hit by his sister-in-law while his wife is standing by watching it. Now, no one is ever going to be able to convince me that a guy from Marcy Projects being hit like that is not thinking in the back of his mind, if I protect myself, if I retaliate, here's what will happen. What did happen, though, is that memes were made to make fun of him, calling him a coward and all these things, but we know that he would have been pathologized even further had he retaliated. So one of the questions I've always asked, and here's the question that there was a very poignant moment for me in one of what turned out to be one of Mr. Samuel's last broadcasts. He said, if you don't like my tone, what black man do you know has the right tone? What is the right way to have an intergender conversation about how to discuss with particularly black women things like facts, realities, and concrete ideas? And the woman who called in really didn't have an answer. And when she struggled for an answer, she picked out Louis Farrakhan.
What?
He said, you think I'm tough, but you want Minister Farrakhan's tone? He was like, no, you don't. And the truth is that there is no acceptable way unless you are silent, marginal, or dead. Now,
you're talking about like how basically you're talking about how do you have tough disagreements? How do you like whatever side you're on? Like you're talking about just basically how do you communicate?
Yeah. So the way Dr. Johnson did it this morning when he was commenting on his colleague, essentially, he said, imagine when Bell Hooks had passed, if I, a person who studies black male studies, had come on and celebrated her death and called her a man-hater who deserved to die and made memes of her, how would that have gone over? Even though she supported the railroading of the Central Park Five and called and sounded as right-wing and callous as she possibly could, and wrote similar things as Donald Trump, and then listed lots of other things that she had done. What if I had done that? Would that have been acceptable? And he said, we all know the answer. So I think there's a term that people in black male studies use called misandry, when you're hated simply because of your gender and gender performance. I don't think that there is an acceptable form of black masculinity other than silence, complete marginalization, or death.
And when you're talking about bell hooks and the Central Park Five, this is something that normally something that's normally not popularly talked about, right? Mm-hmm. Like what did she say?
I'm getting ready to read it to you. I'm glad you asked.
Because that's something that that's something that's normally like not talked about. We're not having that conversation, and I know that we are.
I just want to read this.
We're going to end this conversation soon and get to our next guest. But great. Let's finish off and just talk about that.
This is what she wrote. Now we know that since the time period, we've had the documentary film When They See Us, all of that. We now affectionately call those five black men the exonerated five. We all know that. And many people who were alive at the time knew that they were probably innocent in the first place. But look what Dr. Hooks wrote. No one can truly believe that the young males involved, not alleged to be involved in the Central Park incident were not engaged in a suicidal ritual enactment of a dangerous masculinity that will ultimately threaten their lives, their well-being. If one reads again Michael Dyson's piece, The Plight of Black Men, focusing explicitly on the part where he describes the reason many young black men form gangs, the sense of absolute belonging and unsurpassed love, it is easy to understand why young black males are despairing and nihilistic. And it is rather naive to think that if they do not value their own lives, they will value the lives of others. Is it really so difficult for folks to see the connection between the constant pornographic glorification of male violence against women that is represented, enacted, and condoned daily in the culture and the Central Park crime? That's what she wrote.
Okay. So you're saying it was analysis that history actually proved not just was wrong, but horribly, horribly wrong. Like, in other words, she was saying this about 5 boys who were actually innocent and railroaded. So she focused on actually pathologizing children that were being brutalized by the state, exonerating the state in the analysis.
Correct.
And did she ever apologize for that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
In fact, she then wrote a later book called We Real Cool that discusses Black men in even worse terms than that. And Dr. Johnson says, even though I disagree with her, had she passed away, when she passed away, if I had come out and said horrible things and celebrated her death, what would have happened? Would that have ever been acceptable?
Because there's a difference between the way in which you disagree about something and if
which
it's
means
about
that
ideas.
Which means,
right.
As Dr. Eddie Glaude says, there's a value gap between Black men and Black women that we don't want to discuss. We are the undesirable ones. We're worthy of ridicule, death, marginalization, and silence at all times. And anything outside of that is unacceptable.
Okay. All right. So we're getting ready to go to our next guest, right? Like, because this is something that we'll probably talk about. We will talk about and bring up on the show and have guests on and talk about that later. I know that when people talk about issues of gender, often they don't talk in layered ways about the ways in which Black males are perceived in a much more nuanced way, not just from white supremacy, but I think the nuanced way that you're talking about is from within our own community, right? Because I think that we do a lot of analysis on Black males in general, but we don't do a lot of analysis of our perception within our own community and what those effects are, whether it's in education or employment or any healthcare or any of these other things that affect us. So that we will be coming back to this topic. We are honored to have with us on today to move to the next segment where we are talking about. We're going to talk about not really weed, right? But the whole point of the legalization of weed and the legalization of marijuana and what was promised in that legalization and who the tax revenue was supposed to benefit, right? Like, there were certain levels of taxation, there were certain levels of benefit that were supposed to happen. And people are like, wow, weed has been legalized in New Jersey. We are so happy that weed has been legalized in New Jersey. Look at the social justice implication of weed being legalized in New Jersey. Now, we knew, right, this. I mean, people were celebrating this. People were like, yes, cannot be weed legalization unless we acknowledge that the social justice components, that there were communities that were devastated by criminalizing marijuana, and we're going to make amends. So that happened, right? We are honored, right, to have, and please correct me, but Ami Kachalia?
Yeah, really close. Ami Kachalia.
Ami Kachalia. Ami Kachalia of ACLU, New Jersey. And very glad to have you on our show. The ACLU does some great work in our community. So that's what happened, right? Like, I know that there's so many people came on. It was like, yes, this weed legalization, this marijuana legalization is a good thing. You want to have it. You want to make sure that weed is legalized. And because if it does, that means that revenue will go to these underserved communities that were disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. We know what those communities are. Now, clearly, that money is just flowing in right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is part of what the promise of legalization always was, right? When we advocated for this for almost 10 years, really, what we said from the start is that when we talk about legalizing marijuana, we have to do it in a way that not only begins to repair the past harms, right? Things like expungement, for example, but that also looks forward to how the money that comes in from marijuana legalization is used to support those communities that have seen the most disinvestment, that have been targeted by police when it comes to criminalization, and that money has to happen in a way that is real and robust, right? Because at the end of the day, when we legalized marijuana, what we were doing was essentially flipping a switch. We were making something that used to be legal illegal legal. And we were giving the opportunity for a lot of people to potentially make millions of dollars on it every single year. And it was important to us to make sure that that money went back to community. Now, the great thing about New Jersey is that when we made that law, there was actually money promised for community reinvestment. So something like 60% of the sales tax revenue that comes in from marijuana legalization, and then 100% of this other fee that's collected, all of that money has been promised for community reinvestment, and specifically community reinvestment in what they call impact zone communities. So these are towns across the state that were determined to have been most harmed by the war on marijuana and the war on drugs, which, as you know, still continues. And so this is kind of a moment for action for all of us, because for the first time in this fight, we actually have money now coming in for marijuana because sales started last month. And that means that with every single sale that's made, every single dollar that's collected, money is flowing in for community reinvestment, which means that we're now in a place where we have to make sure that this money actually goes back to the communities that are most harmed, and that it's done in a way that's actually taking into account what they want, right? That their voices are heard in ways that are meaningful, and that it's not just business as usual when it comes to how this money is spent.
So where does this money go? Like, according to the law, does it reside, like, does it reside with the mayors or the county exec, or like who gets to determine what to do with the revenue?
Sure. So it's a mix. At the end of the day, it really comes down to the legislature. So your elected representatives who go to the state house, they're the ones that, as part of the budget process, get to decide how this money is spent, along with the governor. And so every single year between February and the end of June, New Jersey lawmakers and the governor come up with a budget. And at the end of June, they sign it into law. And as part of that budget, they need to decide how the money is used. And so this is an annual process that's huge, right? It's billions and billions of dollars. Cannabis is one piece of it. And we also, of course, know that there was one other body that was allowed to make advisory recommendations for how the money should be used. So here in New Jersey, we have a body called the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Think of them essentially as the agency that gets to decide which businesses get licensed, how the industry works. And as part of the law, they were allowed to give recommendations to the legislature on how the money should be used. And so actually back in March, they held hearings, 3 hearings across the state, where community members could come and testify on how the money could be used. But ultimately, like I said, this authority lies with the legislature and with the governor, which is why we are advocating in front of them. We actually have a rally planned for May 18th down at the State House in Trenton. And the goal is really to bring together community members and advocates and make the demand to all of these elected officials that you made a promise. The promise was that legalization and the revenue from it would go back to the communities most harmed, and we're now here to hold your feet to the fire. Oh, Jonathan, I think you're muted.
Oh, good. So it's good to know that at least there are some ways. There's a budget process that's going to decide how the money actually goes into. That there's a budget process that decides this, and our elected representatives. So when you're saying our elected representatives, and this gets tricky, right? Is it all voted on like a pot? And do the people who actually represent Newark determine where that money is going to go for Newark? Can they just decide? Can the state legislature just decide that a bunch of communities it should go to, and it doesn't necessarily reflect where these arrests have been made? Because I thought that the whole point of the legislation was, here's where all the marijuana arrests happened. We need to put money back in the areas where those people were arrested, because we know on paper where those places were. So can, like, say a place, and hypothetically speaking, let's just assume that predominantly white, wealthy Millburn would not be eligible for such funds, because even if they have higher rates of drug use, they have practically 0 rates of incarceration or arrest because of it.
Sure. So the way it worked is that in the law, there were about 87 towns that were selected as impact zone municipalities. And these are the towns that are eligible to receive the money. And it was decided based on a formula that was created in the legislation. So it's a mix of the areas with the highest rates of marijuana arrests, unemployment, and then just the rate of crime generally speaking. And so when they put all those different factors together, they made that list of 87 towns across the state. And those are the towns that are actually eligible to get the money. Now, how it works in practice in the budget is complicated. So practically speaking, the way we're seeing it play out is that every February or March, the governor puts out a proposed budget. And in that budget, he makes his recommendations about where the money ought to go on a range of issues. And in this year's proposed budget, what they said is that they know money is coming in for community reinvestment from cannabis. And they laid out 4 broad categories where they thought the money could go to existing state level programs that would then allocate dollars back to communities. So for example, the categories they created were economic development, healthcare programs. They had one around reentry and other community-based violence intervention initiatives, and then the last one around infrastructure. And so the intention within that proposed budget looks like what they'd like to do is essentially funnel the money that comes into for reinvestment to specific state level programs that focus on these areas. And then for those individual programs in state departments to then give out the money to say an impact zone. So for example, Newark is an impact zone, Jersey City, Elizabeth, Camden, Trenton, that those individual programs would then give out money to those places through the programming.
So I know that there's talk of a protest on May 18th. Can you tell me what that is about?
Sure. So on May 18th, we and a lot of our partners around the state, both statewide advocacy organizations, community grassroots group, all of us are getting together. And the demand is pretty clear, which is that we want to make sure that as this money gets decided on, it's happening in a way that's truly inclusive and taking into account the voices of people who've lived in these municipalities for decade upon decade, who have been impacted by criminalization, either themselves or a family member or someone else in their community. We want to make sure that it's inclusive because while there is a budget process, the budget process is historically one that is kind of opaque. It's hard to access. It's not particularly transparent for people to really have eyes into. And so we want to make sure that when it comes to this money that was promised for marijuana legalization that is for community reinvestment, that we're not just doing more of the same, that it's not just something that gets decided, somewhere in Trenton, but rather that there's a real effort to make sure that people across the state get a chance to say, here in my community, I need this. Here's what I think is important. And that might be different, right, from what someone thinks is important in a different town, because at the end of the day, each of these towns have different needs, and it's important that the state takes them into account. Now, the other thing that we're going there to talk about is also about how this money should not be used. And so one thing that we have all talked about a lot is that we don't want to see more of the same. We don't want this money to go towards any law enforcement related initiatives. And that's for
hold on. Stop. Wait. Hold on.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm confused.
Okay.
All right. You're saying that the program, the whole thinking behind the program is certain communities have been disproportionately affected by arrests. Like they went to predominantly Black and brown communities, lots of people arrested on marijuana in highly disproportionate rates.
Yes.
So the criminal justice system criminalized, brutalized many individuals in these communities for something that is now legal and cool. And you're saying that the money that is supposed to be a form of my bad, right? Like we're going to try to make something up. Like I don't want to call it reparations because it's not, but it is supposed to be like it is trying to or attempting to, like the philosophy was to try to attempt to repair some harms that have been done from a policy that we broadly now in New Jersey have said was the wrong policy.
Yes.
And you're saying that there are moves for the police department to get the money?
So there's always within the budget, when we look at New Jersey's budget, broadly speaking, over the years, we've spent something like $11 billion funding police and other law enforcement related activities when it comes to the war on drugs. And we know that this money has been funneled in, right? So much money that, as you said, has been used to more or less criminalize Black and Brown communities across the state. And that on the flip side, there's been a lot of disinvestment in the sorts of programs that actually help communities thrive, things like healthcare and education and food and housing assistance, after school programs, whatever it is, those are the areas where we've seen a lot of disinvestment. And so what we don't want to see happen is that this money gets put into the budget and that it's called community reinvestment, but that money somehow gets sent to law enforcement related.
Is that a possibility, right? Like, is that, I'm just asking, right? I'm just throwing it out there. Is that a possibility that they'll be like, well, you know, in Newark, with this community reinvestment money, we need more bulletproof vests? I mean, is that a thing?
I mean, theoretically, in the budget, anything could happen. We haven't seen signs of that necessarily because the budget hasn't come out yet, right? We're still waiting for a proposed budget bill to be shared, and that comes out later in the budget process. But we think it's important for us to preemptively put that in because we know that oftentimes when marijuana legalization initiatives happen, there are attempts to give some of the revenue that comes in to law enforcement. And I should be clear because there's actually money in the legalization law that already does that. Part of the money that comes in from the sales tax revenue is actually meant to go back to police departments. It's a separate bucket of money. It's not the community reinvestment money.
Wait, stop. So, okay, so a whole branch of drug is now legal. That means there's a whole branch of crime that doesn't exist. Why more money?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this was a compromise within the legislation that happened that essentially gives money to what are called drug recognition experts. So like the people who determine whether or not someone is impaired. But it's exactly because of this reason that we're fighting so hard to say none of this money should ever go to law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, law enforcement already has plenty of resources. They didn't need that money from the marijuana legalization bill to begin with. They have plenty of money. They always have to do all of those operations that they've done historically. And so what we are fighting for is to say, we have this new pot of money available at the state level. It is a drop in the bucket in terms of what is owed to the communities that have borne the disproportionate brunt of marijuana criminalization and the war on drugs. And that no matter what we do, we have to make sure that it is in no way used to fund law enforcement anymore. That we have to instead say, how do we fund programs and priorities and other things that really help communities grow and thrive and that give more opportunity to people.
And I just want to welcome our next guest, Raquel Romans Henry. Welcome to All Politics Are Local. Can you just briefly, well, first, welcome. Glad to have you. Zaid will be joining us shortly. He's really he's lauded both of you a lot. Can you just briefly introduce yourself to this conversation?
Yes. Can you guys hear me okay? Is that all right?
Yes, can hear you
Okay.
well.
All right, great. Well, thank you first for having me. My name is Raquel. I'm a policy director with Salvation and Social Justice. I've had the pleasure of working very closely with both Zaid Mohammed as well as Ami in this work. And it's a pleasure to be here with you both.
It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to have you. We were talking, I don't know if you were listening online, but we were just talking about how the rally is to make sure that the money is spent properly. But can you wrap my head around this? Because there are possibly attempts to give money that is supposed to go to help repair damages that have been done from the enforcement of marijuana laws that we all know now should never have happened. And there's this should go to law enforcement or to help me explain this. Can you unpack this for me? Because I'm confused. I'm confused.
Yeah, no, your confusion is definitely appropriate because it really doesn't make any sense. What's happening is that the state is saying that they're responding to a spike in crime and using that as some sort of a justification to allocate funds towards law enforcement rather than where it should be going, which is to repair the communities that have been destroyed as a result of over policing as an extension of the drug war, right? So no, your confusion is not misplaced, but it is definitely it's inappropriate, we'll say.
So what is when you're talking about the rally on May 18th, what is at stake, and what do we want to come from this? Like, because when the process was explained, it seems like it's a very complicated process, right? And so what do we hope to get from this, and how can we know it's concrete? Like, how can we know that, even if they give us what we want, that there's not some legislative loophole that's waiting to give the money to Milburn, right, for their drug rehab programs?
I mean, you want to take first stab at this, or should I?
I think
I'm happy to you can start us off. I'm happy to chime in.
Yeah. Okay. So I just didn't know who the question was directed to, so I apologize.
Oh, both of you actually. But you as well, because we just bring you in the conversation. So we're like, hey, we want you to talk. What's your perspective on this?
All right. Well, I mean, I guess the thing that people have to really keep in mind is that, we need to start the way we want to finish, right? So we can't afford to assume that anything is going to be done. We can't afford to assume that they're going to get it right, and we can't afford to assume that they're going to get it wrong. We have to approach the situation with the same vigor that we approached decriminalization, right? This is a multi-step process. So, all right, cannabis is decriminalized, but now we have to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that means staying actively engaged. That also means not being intimidated by the process. You know, politics, as it will, is set up in a way to almost make people feel like it's something for the others. It's something for no politics. As the name of the show suggests, all politics is local, and it involves each and every one of us, right? So we have to stay engaged. We have to keep our ear to the ground and really be involved in every single step of this to ensure that it's done right, because we really only get one stab at it.
So that is it. So the law, and neither you can chime in. The law seems to have already been written, right? So is what we're pushing for a more transparent process? Like what is the thing that we know, and we're like, all right. Like, I know you're saying we got to watch every step of the way, but sometimes is the process so complicated we don't know what we're watching? I'm asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of this, as Raquel said, is starting as we mean to go. And when it comes to this money, legalization is only just launched here in New Jersey in the sense that money is starting to come in. And so when we think about the money available in this next budget, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars. But in the long term, right, as this industry grows, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year that is potentially available for community reinvestment. And that's why it's so important that we set a precedent now about how community is watching to see how this money is being used, that they're paying attention and they want to see it go back to what it was promised for, and that we will remain vigilant. Because even though this pot of money this year is smaller, in the long term, there's so much money on the table that has to go back to the places that have been most harmed. Now, in terms of what we're looking for, I think it's a few different things. It's looking at the state budget that will eventually come out and seeing how much money, right? Like, how much money is the state actually spending on what they call enforcing the drug war, and how much are they actually spending on investing in community? How much of this money that's been promised for community reinvestment is going to fund things that organizations and advocates and grassroots groups are actually asking for, and how much of it is going to fund kind of existing priorities that get funded every year to begin with? And so those are the kinds of checks that we have to do and make sure of. In terms of what we're hoping to get, out of the rally, it's building more awareness, right? So not only amongst the public so that they know that this is an area they need to be paying attention to, but also lawmakers, because the budget process is so big, it's quite easy for the cannabis money to get lost in the process. And we need to make sure they understand what's on the line here and that they have a responsibility to be accountable to their communities.
So really it's, hey, Black people, Latinos, everybody who was in a place that got jacked during the drug war. Attention, attention. You're about to get jacked again. Let's stop it, right? Is it really just to call out the legislature beforehand to be like, look, I'm not calling you a devil, but you're acting pretty devilish. You need to stop. Is that really a kind of like a, we need to call you out first before you do something stupid because we know you want to do something stupid? Like, not stupid for you, but horrible for us. You want to do, we know right now there are incentives for people to jack the people of Newark and Camden and take all that money and either put it in bulletproof vests or to give it to Milburn or to do something crazy that we're going to be like, huh, what? Oh. So instead of going, oh, after they do it, you're like, May 18th is your chance to force them first. Is that really the sentiment?
I think what's happening here is that we're saying the burden is on the part of the legislators to show us otherwise, right? The burden is not on us. The burden isn't on the people to assume that they're going to do the right thing, right? We have the benefit of history on our side, right? We've seen how these things can go. So that's what we're operating from. We're operating from a historical gaze, right? And we're letting them know that we're paying attention. Our finger is on the pulse of what's happening, and it's not going to happen this time around. But it's also a rallying cry to the public to let them know that every win we've had has not been in spite of the people, but because of the people, right? So it's really it's to remind people that you do have the power, and you have to use it. You have to lift it up.
So it's like, historically, we know you got the smallpox blankets. We know you got them ready for us. Nah, no Satan, not this time. Not this time. Here's the question, and I think that you can't do anything else, right? But the question I also have is, are there concrete, like, is there a vision of what we are demanding? Like, have people in Camden and Newark been like, this is what you need to do? Because to some extent, I think that maybe, and I'm just throwing this out there, right? Because I don't know, right? But unless we demand what we are demanding, as in like, no, here's what it means to reinvest. Here are our definitions of reinvest. Here are the programs we are like. When the rubber meets the road on those things, is it just our legislatures who are in that room? And are there already demands on, because people make these back deals all the time, right? Like, we don't, who's the Speaker of the Assembly or whatever. I mean, those things happen, and then they announce, oh, there's a position open, but they already made a decision about what's going on and what's going to happen. So, are you working with politicians who are going to be in the room, and is there a sense of what we're already demanding?
I think there have been a lot. So, Raquel and I are on today, and we're only two of the many organizations around the table that are demanding, and being part of the rally that's on the 18th. And many of them have put in funding requests for things they'd like to see get more love within the budget. And I think a lot of what people have been asking for are the sorts of things I talked about earlier. So funding for harm reduction, funding for education programs, after school initiatives, funding for housing and food assistance, alternatives to policing and all those sorts of models for community response as opposed to law enforcement response. And so I think a lot of organizations are making those asks and wanting to get them funded. And they're part of this process too. I don't think ultimately at the end of the day, it's the ACLU of New Jersey that should say where the money should go. It really is the communities on the ground that get to decide how that money is used. And so this rally is really just about making sure that we're amplifying those voices and holding people to account. But ultimately, it's really folks who live in those communities who ought to get to decide. And that's what this is all about.
So it seems like you were like, Raquel, this is on the organizations that you represent. And because the ACLU is like, hey, we just get in a fight and punch people. And we're like, hey, we're punching, right? these are our rights. We protect rights. That's all we consider. Rights are important. But you're working with organizations who are doing more of that actual grassroots organizing. Is that what I'm hearing? For Raquel Henry?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ami got it exactly right. Is that we're simply trying to lay the ground, create a platform for those voices to be heard. We're by no means the final arbiters on how money is going to be spent or how it's going to be allocated or anything of that nature. So definitely just amplifying the voices.
So I know that Hakim Greene, I know that you're supposed to be on in a later segment, but are you there, Hakim?
Yep, I'm here.
Peace,
everybody.
I know you're supposed to be on when we're talking about the controversy of hip hop that we're talking about last week. But I know that in your background, the whole concept of weed legalization is near and dear to your heart. I think that might be a bit of a euphemism. You have been talking about, like, as a matter of fact, the first time I met you, the first time you were on the show, maybe about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you were talking about certain forms of legalization that were kind of already there in a backdoor way with certain materials, et cetera. And you were really talking about the business aspect of that in New York. And that's the first time I had heard a lot of that stuff was when you were talking about it on air, in terms of being an entrepreneur in that field and talking about it. They're talking about the weed legalization laws in New Jersey and a rally on May 18th to make sure that the people who, like the communities that were devastated by the war on drugs, actually get a fair share of that. I'm just curious about do you have any questions for them on that, especially in New Jersey? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I do know that this is a topic that, like, if I was going to put anybody on the spot on this topic of weed legalization and, reparations, or not, I don't want to say reparations, but money to go back in communities that were devastated by the war on drugs. I mean, it just seems like, this is just great. It's a wonderful coincidence to have you here. So do you have any comments, any questions of our panelists or things to say?
Yeah, well, I didn't catch most of your conversation, so I don't really have any questions. I didn't know what you guys were talking about. I thought you were talking about something having to do with education.
Well, it was really about the new laws in New Jersey about weed legalization and how there are a lot of people who are going to make a lot of money off of this, predominantly white people making a lot of money off of this, which is predicted. So when people were making the actual laws, they were like, you got to give at least 60% back to the communities that were most affected by this. And again, just throwing this out there because I know you're an entrepreneur. I know that you are a legal entrepreneur, always have been. And I know that this subject of weed legalization means a lot to you. So about New Jersey's law, right? What has that made, like, what do you think about that in general in terms of the weed legalization, the social justice components? And again, trying to get this in there because it's just a coincidence. We have you as a guest, and I do value a lot of your opinions on this.
Yeah. Well, I don't really know enough about what's going on, in New Jersey to have an actual opinion. I know that there was some talk about, the social equity component in the weed legalization movement in New Jersey. I've heard some things they were trying to model themselves after Illinois and the way the Illinois rollout was going, but then I've heard some negative things about the Illinois rollout that was kind of fugazi. I've heard some stuff. I've seen some stuff on the internet about the lack of diversity as the rollout happens in New Jersey, and then I have a friend who's more in tune with what's going on the state level in terms of setting up, I guess, intermediary organizations in between the local municipalities and the state municipalities and people who are trying to actually acquire dispensaries, grow operations, so forth and so on, to make sure that there's a large enough population of people who've been affected negatively in regards to law enforcement around cannabis. But I don't know how these things are rolling out in real time to really have a solid opinion on it, other than to say that there really needs to be a department on, I guess, on the state or county or city level as these things roll out that ensure that, you know, underserved communities are targeted to be integrated into the cannabis industry, that we have educational programs in these communities, agricultural programs in these communities. Also, there's an industrial hemp side of this whole thing that's not about smoking weed. It's about textiles and the industrializing of the plant. There's so many ways to be a part of this industry: transport, warehouse, grow, retail. You don't have to do one thing. There's the CBD side, there's the medicinal side. So helping people understand how they can use the space that they're in, their backyards, their you know, whether they got grow spaces within their private area, you know, how to utilize this plant in a way that's beneficial for us on a local level. There needs to be a very targeted operation, you know, with money behind it to identify how we could, you know, target communities the same way we target them to lock them up. Let's target them to educate them. Let's target them to, you know, fund them. And, you know, so that's
actually that is the conversation, right? And the conversation behind that. So I know that we are running out of time. So for Raquel and Ami, can you tell us what is most important about this rally? What do we need to do? Anything that you want to say about this? Because I really respect the work that you're doing. We need to have you back on for a longer period of time to really get into a lot more that's around it, because you've been talking. I mean, we've only touched the surface, and what you're saying, I've learned a lot just from the conversation as well. So, and anything to say about the? Yes. Hello?
I just want.
Oh, Hakim, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, ladies, anything cannabis related, you got to have Madism involved. You just do. If you understand what Madism means to the cannabis, the explosion, the commercialization, the acceptance, Madism is what made cannabis, you know, a culturally relevant thing. Madism. All we do is spark Madism. Sean, I mean, you could probably give more information, but please, ladies, May 18th, I don't know if it's too late. You really need to have me involved. You just do. But I'll follow up.
And yeah, I mean, that's why I thought it was just great in terms of you being on, because I'm like, there's so many people who love this. I know that you've loved this through many years, and on the business side and on the entertainment and artist side. And you have an entire philosophy that is rooted in the things that are being talked about. So that is very much appreciated. So yes. So ending off this section, May 18th. This is the rally. What's at stake?
I can start. Maybe Raquel, you can chime in too. I think what's at stake here is setting a precedent for how community reinvestment should be done here in New Jersey, and who gets to be at the table, who gets to make the decisions, how the money is used. I hope that this isn't the last time that we see community reinvestment, right? It shouldn't be that this one tiny pot of cannabis community reinvestment money is the last time this happens. There's so much disinvestment that's happened for decade upon decade, and this is just the start. And so I think this is an opportunity for all of us to come together to lay the groundwork for what that looks like, and to hold our lawmakers accountable to promises that they made. This is about implementation. Lots of promises get made in legislation. We have to make sure they actually come to fruition. And so this is a chance for us to actually put that into practice and make sure that money is going back to the communities that are most harmed. I think it's also a chance for us to make sure that at the end of the day, we are having a conversation more and more often about the fact that all of this money that exists, none of it should be, and when we think about the drug war, we should not be using the criminal legal system for anything related to drugs, right? At the end of the day, drug use is a public health issue. And so we need to stop as a state investing in law enforcement as a response to drugs, and instead think about health and other resources that we can provide to people in order to help them thrive and grow. And so this is the start to that conversation as well.
All right, thank you. And Raquel?
And I'll just piggyback on that, everything Ami said, but also, you mentioned the word reparations. This is very much also about reparative justice, right? And reparative justice doesn't begin or end with stopping arrest. It also means, like Brother Hakim was mentioning, who said he didn't have actual opinion. He sounded well versed, and I enjoyed hearing his points. Reparative justice also involves making sure that the communities who have been most harmed have not just an opportunity to see investments back into their communities in the form of education and healthcare and all of that, but also that they have an opportunity to get in on the business, right? And to really uh, grow economic growth, to see economic growth in this market as well. So it has very multiple layers to it, and we definitely want to make sure that the people are educated on all those layers and have their hands in the pot.
Okay, thank you so much. And we just have the last question that we always ask to our guest. Who is your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group? This is All Politics Are Local. We believe in there needs to be and as always is an intersection between politics and culture. So talk to us.
All right, I'll go first because you're talking my language now. My favorite is gonna be a toss up between probably the god Rakim Allah and Black Thought, and I'll even throw Mos Def in there. So I had to throw three.
All right, now that's good. That's all good. That's all good. And Ami?
And I'm going to be honest and say I don't really have one, but I will take Raquel's recommendations. And so looking to learn more. And next time I'll have a recommendation for you.
All right, fair enough. All right, thank you so much.
May 18th. Wait a minute. I'm going to send you guys my last album, Madism, Who Want This Smoke, and I'm going to be your new favorite artist. And I'm going to provide you with the soundtrack for May 18th.
Hakim Greene
Looking forward to it.
Hakim Greene is a very accomplished artist and thinker and entrepreneur. He's someone that we respect deeply on this show, and he's very deeply respected throughout the United States and many parts of the world. So we love him dearly.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, and it was really good to meet you.
Really good meeting you too, and we definitely need to have you on again. So thank you. All right, so Hakim, this is All Politics Are Local. We're getting to this next part where we talked about before. There was a conversation that was had. Chris Randall is going to be joining us shortly, and we're going to jump right into it. And hopefully DJ Rhino will be joining us as well, so we could jump into this, because that's the whole point of having this great conversation around this. But when you were talking about Madism, can you just explain to us what that is? Just go into it. Just break it down. What is Madism?
Mad means a lot. Ism means pot. We gonna keep it moving means we won't ever stop. Mary Jane, reefer, weed, ganja, cannabis sativa, terms for marijuana. Smoked by the earliest man with no drama. Smoked by the lawyers and judges, yes, your honor. Smoked by the Hindu and ancient Dalai Lama. Smoked by the church and early church fathers. Before crack got him, before crack gets him. Herb was the word, your man, you laugh with him. Spark madism and got glad with him. Then in 85, bam, the crack hit him. Whole neighborhoods, damn, that did him. Worst that got hit for real was black women. That's a song called What Is Madism on the album Madism, Who Want This Smoke. We break down Madism, cannabis, and the political ramifications of this plant. That's what that song is about. What is Madism? That's what I mean. I got the soundtrack for the whole movement. They got to tap in. Like, it's the soundtrack. Madism, Who Want This Smoke?
Because it's when for years and years there was no problem, but then all of a sudden now they got to throw people in jail.
Right. you criminalize our culture. You know, it's really about repackaging slavery. It's really what it is.
Can you break that down? Like what you like repackaging slavery?
Yeah, repackaging slavery. Well, you know, slavery was abolished in the United States in the late 1800s, and they had a number of amendments, the 13th Amendment, namely, that says it's illegal to hold a person in bondage unless the person is convicted of a crime. So the whole now trick is to take your culture and everything associated with it and make it criminal. So you can't help but to commit crime because your culture is criminal. And then you look at the competition that hemp/cannabis are provided against tobacco and alcohol, and you understand why cannabis and hemp would be, you know, illegal, and communities who indulge targeted for arrest.
So you're saying, so what you're really even talking about is that it's the behaviors that are, it's the people that are criminal, not the behavior. Like, so if people culturally are like, we're going to wear our pants low, then somebody will make a law saying we should criminalize people for wearing their pants low.
Right. Exactly. It's
which
everything.
Actually,
no, it's just everything about it's an act of war. It's an act of destroying you. You know, you have an industry that, you know, centers around cannabis or hemp, right? So if we make it illegal, you can't, you know, create commerce for yourself. You can't, like, there's a large population of brothers and sisters that eat every day because they sell weed. And, you know, weed is just a cultural norm. So it's so easy to provide for yourself and your family. Now, if we could, you know, develop that acumen that is business and build it out and create a structure for it, then we can then take the revenue raised and then direct it and, you know, create more profit and more commerce and more finance for the other things that we want to do. And they know that if we destroy that, if we criminalize that, you know, we break the competitive edge you have. A lot of this is based on competition. How do we keep Black and brown people from progressing? We have to destroy the structures that keep their culture and their, you know, hip hop is another one. How do we criminalize hip hop? By making hip hop criminal. We're going to make hip hop about crack. We're going to make it about busting your gun. We're going to make hip hop about all these criminal things. So just the act of participating in the culture is criminal. And we have reason to lock you up.
Now you're directly getting into the things that we were talking about last week, right?
Exactly.
And we're getting into that whole, like, that last thing you said, which was about hip hop being criminalized, right? And are you saying that it's criminalized from like it has to be about things that are illegal so we can make hip hop illegal? Can you repeat? Can you explain that further? And then I know Chris Randall and DJ Rhino are going to jump right in.
Yeah,
because this is the heart of the conversation we were having last week.
Yeah, one of the biggest tricks played on us, and we, you know, I'm guilty of participating in this trick, right? Is keeping it real. That concept, keeping it real, where, you know, our acceptance of different artists was predicated on how real they were. So you telling these street tales, these big murder, kill, I'm selling key, and then people want to check your pedigree to see how real you were. So now you got, you know, generations of people creating the realness in hopes that they could sell it to you in rap form. And that's just a trick that was played on us, because you go, oh, The Godfather, oh, Scarface, yeah, but Al Pacino not running around talking about keep it real. Robert De Niro's not running around talking about keep. Martin Scorsese's not running around talking about keep. They go, it's entertainment. It's really entertainment. It's Hollywood. It's we get it. But for us, our entertainment has to be grounded in realness.
So I know that. Well, welcome. Hey, Rhino, Chris Randall, welcome. I know that you have comments, so speak up, man. Like, what's going on? Chris Randall, you're on mute. Or maybe you're not on mute. Your sound is not coming through.
There's a crazy.
Yeah, you're like growling, like it's
still muted.
Yes, you're actually muted right now, Chris Randall.
Is that better?
That is better.
Now we can hear you, but there's still a distortion somewhere coming from somebody.
Yeah, that I think, Chris Randall, that is you. But it's a slight distortion. But speak your mind, and
it's not him.
Oh, I guess not. Oh, Rhino, it's you.
It's me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's you. Yeah.
Yeah. But talk to me about what you were talking about, a comment on it, and then we'll get Chris Randall back.
You talking about me?
Yeah, yes. What do you have to say about, he just broke it down in terms of keep it real.
Yeah, but
he basically said keep it real bad.
Unfortunately, that was the whole 90s. And I was I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we all were caught up in that era of keeping it real, and everything that you were rapping about at that time, you had to really be about that life. If you weren't about that life, you were going to get tested. Somebody was going to step to you. You know what I mean? They may step to you on stage. You know what I'm saying? If you weren't about what you were rapping about at that time. So it got dangerous because you had people who weren't about that life anyway in the beginning trying to be about that life because this is what they were rapping about, or this is what they thought they had to rap about. And if they have to rap about this, okay, now I'm going to have to live this too. You know what I'm saying? And so you had people who weren't even about that life getting, becoming, stick up kids and drug dealers and murderers and all of that just so they can be for real, just so they can be living what they're rapping about. You know what I'm saying? And then that's how we ended up with a lot of people dead and in jail. You know what I mean? That's how we end up with what they call the drill music today. You know what I'm saying? It's like people doing this stuff and then they coming into the studio rapping about what they just did. You know what I'm saying? Basically dry snitching on themselves. But like that's where we are right now. And yeah, the 90s was the keep it real era. You know what I'm saying? Prior to that, in the 80s,
go bang.
Yeah, in the 80s, in the 80s, it was all fantasy. You know what I'm saying?
If
somebody was talking about shooting, or and you didn't really have a whole lot of gun talk in the 90s. I mean, in the 80s, but you would hear stuff about beat downs or how much money somebody had, and all of that was fantasy. You know what I'm saying? And everybody took it as fantasy and entertainment. And once the 90s came in, it became about keeping it real, and it got dangerous.
So what you're saying is that when KRS-One was talking about like the song that Chris Randall was singing on Criminal Minded, then that was fantasy.
Can I tell you this? Can I tell you the story of that whole situation? Rhino, you might want to mute your joint. Hey, thank you, brother. So KRS-One, Knowledge Reigns Supreme, right? It was a conscious artist, homeless dude, lived in a shelter, but spent a lot of time in the library. He spent a lot of time following different alternative ways of life. The Hare Krishnas, which is how he got the name Chris, because he was following around the Hare Krishnas who used to dress in robes and give away. He was real big with the activism and the give back, even though he was homeless and what have you, right? Scott convinced him to take it more gangster. Thought Chris was a little bit too conscious, was going to go with people's head.
DJ Scott LaRock?
DJ Scott LaRock, who had the college degree and was a social worker, is telling Chris, the homeless dude, yo, you too conscious. You need to make it more street. Let's dumb it down. Chris didn't want to do that. He gave up the fight, gave Scott what he wanted. But the irony is Scott LaRock gets shot in the head. That's why when you listen to By All Means Necessary and all the other music that Chris put out, which is a lot of that stuff was already recorded and done, was conscious, because the idea was to reach people where they are so you could take them where they need to be. Not go down where people are and stay there.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah, I see all these things are just sort of strange. And maybe I guess it's strange because I'm from a particular kind of environment. Also, Hakeem, I was in my closet earlier and I was looking for my T-shirt and it was missing, but now I know who got it. So if you can just return it, it's cool. We good. That's one, we good. You can just return it.
Which one's
that? I see that you're wearing it right now. If you just return it,
I was going to say something about that shirt. That shirt is hot. I like that.
Oh,
shirt.
thank you.
I'm just saying, we're gonna have, you can just return it anytime you're ready. And
big shout out to Render Writer, who's the creator of this shirt. He's actually the artist that does murals with this stuff on it, and he turned it into a T-shirt.
Yeah, you need to just go and put the link out over here.
I got you. Yeah, I got you. Render Writer, I got you.
Chris, I wanted to say real quick, just that the little comment that you made, I wanted to say that, even in the 80s, people came from certain environments. You know what I'm saying? Like, the toughest environment that you could think of right now has existed for ages. I mean, we've all gone through it. You know what I'm saying? The difference is, in the 80s, the people that were living in those conditions weren't necessarily glorifying those conditions. They did rap about it because Melly Mel was one of the first to bring it up in the message. You know what I'm saying? He was one of the first.
And they had a song called White Lines.
Say that again?
They had a song called White Lines that was recorded while they were high on coke, but they were talking against cocaine.
Telling you, don't do it. Right.
Why?
Right. And then you could think. And then you got to think about some of those early pioneer MCs. Some of them were stick-up kids. Some of them were pimps and drug dealers or whatever. But they didn't rap about it. And I'm gonna tell you this. I remember in the Fearless 4, Mike C rapped about how he was out there on the block. You know what I'm saying? But they were talking about problems of the world today. I'm out here on the block. You know what I'm saying? I gotta deal with my lawyer, this, that, and other. Going to court. Like Mike C had some real lyrics going on in his verses. They all did. Yeah. They were talking about what was going on in the hood, but it wasn't glorifying it. It was bringing it to the attention, because at that time rap was all about party anyway. So it was just about bringing it to the attention. Yeah, this is what we're living in. This is what we see right outside our front door. This is what it is. And we didn't have nothing like that before. So it blew up. You know what I mean? But then it took a turn in the 90s. You know what I mean? Where the lifestyles that we were talking about in the 80s that we experienced in our real lives, now people are trying to emulate that stuff. You know what I'm saying?
I'm sorry. I mean, can I just add to your point? And there's a difference between being creative, writing, just being an artist, and someone in a boardroom going, we're going to target market this, target market that. This is going to be your single. This is going to be your image. This is going to be the photo shoot. This is how we're going to get to radio. This is the brands and the money that we're going to put behind it. It's different than someone just being creative and just telling the story and sharing it. And it literally having that grassroots acceptance because we understand and we relate, than somebody in the office going, this is what we need from you. This is how you're going to come out. You got to give us this or we're not going to be able to sell this.
Is that what you're saying? Chris Randall, you were saying?
I was saying, like, to me, I guess it's interesting because there's an article that I'm going to share for all of y'all to read. There was a song in 2018 that Pusha T recorded called Cold Blooded. And it is literally the story of how you get millennials, people my age, and the problems that we suffer in terms of drug abuse, nihilistic, pathological behavior. He's explaining the whole thing. And in the lines, the song starts off with black child born in the storm, trying to bundle up to keep warm, bodega babies. And he's walking you through this whole thing. Early childhood sexual assault, drug addicted parents, missing fathers. It's a story about why these people behave this way. And so for me, I guess I'm the most offended is where it becomes a reading of this work becomes, it's all about glorification. I just don't think that's a real critical understanding of it at all.
That song you just mentioned came out when?
2018.
Right. It wasn't on this album.
No, it wasn't on this album.
All right. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Like I'm one of those artists that continually over 20 some odd 30 years talked about the conditions that you just referenced, but I didn't get the recognition. I don't get the and I understand why, because people are captivated by the bullshit. Excuse my language, excuse me. By the BS. So, that doesn't mean that, I give you another. And so KRS-One, we first got in the studio with KRS-One, right? And we did our first demo. Highly influenced by Souls of Mischief, highly influenced by Tribe Called Quest, highly influenced by De La, highly influenced by like more lyrical, eclectic artists. So when we did our first demo, Chris was like, yo, man, y'all too educated. Y'all gonna go over people's heads. Y'all need to dumb it down. Y'all need to be talking about busting your gun, getting with chicks, drinking beers, smoking weed. That needs to be your image. I'm like, brother, I'm a school teacher. There's no way I'm doing that. There's no way. And I can do it if I want. But I'm not going to represent myself contrary to what I know is like what I've been showing these kids and talking about with these children. And I'm not going to play. I'm not going to. So it's that, how far are you willing to sell your, like, Chris switched his thing up. He gave you Criminal Minded. And then the guy who got him to do it got shot in the head.
And everything was conscious after that.
Everything was conscious after that. Like, but it was him being at Jive Records, trying to compete with Too Short, trying to compete with E40, trying to compete with these other, because you had a regional music and you had national music. So when Chris and them first came out, hip hop was regional. You can, do a college run, do a Philly, New York, Philly, DC, New York, Virginia, Rhode Island, Baltimore, and you can stay right there and you can eat, right? Then you got to a turn that wasn't enough. If your record wasn't going to move nationally, then you was going to get dropped. He was going to get. So now you like, okay, I kind of gotta, I gotta compete with NWA. I gotta compete with NWA. How am I going to do this?
Right.
And you try to balance it out. We come after kind of the explosion of gangster rap music. We kind of squeaked through because we had the Weed record. We was associated with Chris, who still had, a strong sense of it's KRS-One. But if we wasn't busting our gun and giving you all this other street stuff, it was going to be like we either had to be Black Eyed Peas, who had just happened to be blessed enough to have the support of Jimmy Iovine's son as their manager, to have somebody stand behind us and push us through, or we was going to have to sell out. I chose not to sell out.
Yeah, for me,
Chris Randall, you were saying.
I was saying, to me, I guess it's and just so y'all know, I'm working on something that I'm trying to publish too. So I've been kind of thinking about this a lot. I hear your voice in my head, Hakeem, like all the time, and like DJ Rhino is so much cooler than me. So it's just like I got it. I get it. But I guess where it's tough is the presentation of the music. Ooh, how am I gonna say this without saying a disrespect? Let me work. Hold on.
Be disrespectful.
There are certain artists who I think are geniuses that I couldn't use. Like if Prince had been a poet and had published, like if Purple Rain had came like this, and I could have been here with it, I would have loved it. But because it was a song and because it was an album, and because Prince was who he was, I was like, that aesthetic ain't gonna work. I don't know how you wear those outfits in Minnesota. I've been to Minnesota. It's brick. It's colder than any kind of cold you ever want to experience in your life. There's no way you wore that outfit in Minnesota. But whatever.
Well, one time I was in Minnesota, they actually said that it was colder in Minnesota than it was on Mars. Mars was warmer than the temperature in Minnesota on that day.
It's crazy in Minnesota.
Hakeem, they literally told us if you go outside, in the contract to where we were traveling to, and Mr. Austin's a witness, if you go outside and you die,
it's not on us.
We're not responsible. We're gonna have this whole. So they had this whole event, Hakeem. We literally got off the plane, went in the airport, got picked up. They took us straight to event, which was at a hotel. The whole thing was in the hotel. And they had like in the contract, if you go outside and you die, that's on you. Because we having this whole thing in here. There are tons of restaurants, rooms, there everything. If you go outside, that's on you. So I'm just saying I understand that. Okay. But my point would be the presentation that I'm getting that I got from DMX, that I got from the Clips, that I got from Pusha T now, that I got from Nas, that I got from T.I., that I got from 50, made sense to me based on the environment that I was in. So I don't know. Like there are moments.
I mean, I'm from. I got you. I'm from the same environment though.
Yeah,
so right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like,
I'm from East Orange, New Jersey. I would be on 18th Street when I used to dance for the Naughty by Nature with the new style. I would be on 18th Street looking at these jokers like, Vin, take me home till y'all done doing what y'all doing. When y'all ready to practice, let me know. Because I watch my aunts and uncles get taken out by heroin. And I watch my cousins and my best friends get taken out by crack. So y'all
but your presentation,
it's just crazy.
But this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying though. Your aesthetic, along with DJ Rhino's aesthetic, are very palatable to kids from the environments that I'm from, which is why I can listen to your music. There are certain other artists who I love, but I'm not like them. I ain't gonna say no name, but I don't want to feel like being disrespectful, but I'm just not like them. And when I hear the things that they say, I just like,
Right, but all right, so in 91, in 88, 89, everybody listened to Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Everybody listened to Souls of Mischief. Everybody, it's just, it was this, got to a point where, so like 92, 93, 94, mainstream media said, if you're not this, you're not black, and black people believed it.
Yeah, and I think, but this is what I'm saying. I think that, and again, I'm also talking about something that I've been thinking about out loud, and I got like a stack of articles I've been reading, like the whole thing I've been going through, because Hakeem is against my sleep. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But when I sit there and I think about the seriousness of the conversation and the seriousness of the content, and when I hear Pusha T saying things like, you know, the game ruined my childhood. Should I have a turkey drive to troll the mayor because we feed the projects for the rest of the year? When he's talking about losing a friend that's decided to have particular kinds of conversations with a white person that's not interested in the real preservation of the culture in a particular kind of way, in order for his own publicity, how that hurt him, the vulnerability of that. Like, I understand all those things. So I don't, what I guess what I'm saying is, I do understand the value of a KRS-One. I do understand the value of a Black Star. I do understand the value of De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest. And that I listen to those people too. But I would say that the presentation that I'm getting from Pusha T feels more like the way I would do it if I could rap. Can't rap, but if I could rap, I probably would sound like that.
That's fair. I wish he was just on this particular project. Let me just say, because I listened to it today. I wasn't thrilled. I wasn't. Oh my God, he said this. Oh my God, he said that. I wasn't. It was like, all right.
Yeah, but like, how many chefs like the food at restaurants?
Huh?
How many chefs? If you are a chef at a 5-star Michelin restaurant, like how many fast food? How many restaurants do you like that you're impressed by?
I mean,
you're rare air, bro. You are rare.
Thank you. However, I'm still looking to be talked about like Pusha T gets talked about, because in my opinion, I don't know if y'all heard the Naameen project, but in my opinion, it's fire and it's competitive with any and everything out there right now. But it's like the conversation. How do you get the people to have the conversation about it? People go, did you listen to the project? Nah, I like your joints. I like, man, we'll share it, bro. Talk about it. Like, I got some very pointed themes in that music relative to Pusha T, even though I'm not talking about Pusha T. I'm talking about Pusha T. even though I'm not really talking about Pusha T. I'm talking about all of the Dave Chappelle, Kanye and Kim, even though I'm not talking about that. Just the way society is in love and hip hop. The way New York rap is, New York rap has been stagnant since we've been it's just one bar, it's one wave, and it's really Atlanta. Like I discuss all that, and I'm like, how do I get people to vibe with it? What am I not saying in the way they need to hear it to make them go?
Well, okay. So here's the thing. So here's the thing. Now I'm gonna tell you. Now somebody got to go under the bus. Who's gonna be Jonathan Austin? So, I just heard about you and I have just been introduced to each other, right? I am saying that I'm going back and trying to understand and listening to your music and a bunch of things. And you should probably know you're probably going to end up getting cited in this article. So just know it's coming.
That's okay.
Just know it's coming. So that way I know, I said it digitally to your face.
You didn't set it up. You didn't set me up. I got you.
But so the first time I heard the clips was like 2001. So I'm like 14 all the way to now listening. I grew up listening to their music, but I think there's the same feeling I got from this album, the I Pray For You song. It's the same song, same thing I got from the I'm Not You on the first project, right? I'll send you a link to the song you listen. So because I didn't grow up with the first hip hop album was ever given to me, my mother bought Are You Still Down by Tupac. That was the first hip hop album I was ever purchased for me. I will never forget. I was in the third grade and I lost my mind. I was like, "What is this?" And I think that there's levels of the way I grew up listening to music and what I think about it. And at the same time, there are lots of things that I say that I have been a part of, and I have, sadly. But I don't think about it from the perspective of it's not braggadocious. There are lots of moments on that like on that open air record, that doesn't sound, to me, it just doesn't sound like, it doesn't sound like, we're just excited about all this. Like I'm glad that I did this. Like, it doesn't sound like that. I was already let down by, am I just doing this to troll the mayor when I feed the projects for the rest of the year? And I've already been let down by all the people who were supposed to care. Like, I don't know if that don't sound like braggadocious, gratuitous greatness to me. But maybe my ears aren't trained to hear it in that same way.
There's just an air that Pusha T carries that's a very, like he really doesn't care about what he's saying. He just says what he feels and he really doesn't care. And then because he doesn't really care, for me, I don't really care. It's just you get a sense that you're listening and it's like, I don't really think he understands what he's saying and how it's pushing an agenda that's bigger than him. And not just him. There's a lot of people out there that are doing things for the entertainment value of it without really understanding what's being left after they've done what they've done. And I'm not saying that it's his responsibility to save everybody, and I'm not saying that he just makes negative music. I'm sure there's times he tries to insert some, but it's like, the full body of work is, it's King of New York to me. It's the drug dealer, it's I'm the man because I'm the connect. It's like, all right. Okay, now what? Okay, you're the man. You're the coke dealer. Now what? That was my problem with Jay for like ever and a day, and he gave me 444.
Yeah, like, I'm glad you said that. Because what I'm feeling, what I'm getting from Push, because I hear what you're saying too, Hawk, as far as like, for me, it's the delivery. Like, he still delivers it like almost in a cocky sense. You know what I'm saying? Almost, which is why it comes across like glorification, you know what I'm saying? Because he comes across cocky with it, you know what I mean, when he's talking about it. So it's hard to get those messages. The messages are in there. That song I Pray For You, that's the last song on the album, and that's more of his more reflective. His reflective song, you know what I'm saying? He breaks things down and gets a little more deeper. And what I'm hoping and expecting, well, I'm not gonna say I'm expecting, but what I'm hoping for is that he takes it from that on with his next project. Because
what's gonna happen? I'm sorry.
Because what I'm seeing is what I feel like Pusha right now is where Jay was when he was doing like the Dynasty album. Like Jay, when Jay was doing the Dynasty album, he was like a doses. He was still up, you know what I mean? But the growth was starting to slip in, you know what I'm saying? Because right after that, right around that is where, you know, Beyonce came into his life and he started being a little bit more reflective about, you know, what he was doing. Things started changing project through project. And I think Push right now is at that beginning stage where the self-reflection is going to start becoming more. I believe. I see it.
I think what's going on.
But where he's at right now, yeah, I mean, like I said, his delivery is still coming across. Like, you know, he's doing this thing. You know what I'm saying?
It's going to be somebody who does the KRS-One reach down to touch him, but that person is going to stand up and be the biggest artist since Tupac, and then Pusha T is going to change.
That's possible. That's possible.
It's going to take somebody like a Jay-Z, but not Jay-Z, to go, no, this is the wave now. And everybody goes, let me hop on the wave, because that's what everybody's doing.
But like, I guess what's weird is that I think there's a level of that same reflection that y'all are talking about from that last song on the album, and also this present, I feel like throughout Almost Dry in moments. I feel like, first of all, what I found out about that album, doing some research about it, at least for the 6 tracks, because it's 12 tracks, 6 of them produced by Kanye, 6 produced by Pharrell. During all the Pharrell tracks, they had the movie The Joker playing, which I learned about from Mr. Austin. He's the one that taught us about the Joker. I just learned I wasn't really a big comic fan. And so if you listen to the album, he's trying to channel Arthur Fleck throughout the whole thing, right? It's telling certain stories from the really dark inner emotions. And I think that for most of us, and I'm not gonna speak for, I'll at least just speak for myself. I'm not always the person I am sitting right now, surrounded by all these books. I'm not always that guy. I don't always feel like that. I would like to quote a very off talk about white liberal. You know, I like to channel the better angels of my nature. I'd like to tell you that I feel like that all the time, but I don't. And I think that the honesty is like, as I grew up and when I was in different situations, how did I feel? How did I react? What kind of energy was I channeling? What kind of stuff was going on? I felt all that.
Here's a question I have, and maybe it's just me, right? I think that the way I hear Jay-Z has always been very different. And maybe it's my bias. Maybe it's just because when I listened to Jay-Z, I was in my 20s in terms of hearing Reasonable Doubt. Maybe it's like I loved Reasonable Doubt as an album. I think American Gangster is probably one of the best albums ever. And it's because part of it is, it's not.
Look at the 5-star Michelin chef's face in the corner. I'm sorry,
what?
Look at the 5-star Michelin chef's face right now.
I got you. I know, I hear it, right? But
so what I'm saying is, I think every party that DJ Rhino go to, he thinks the DJ sucks. I just think I would be willing to bet that he go to if he went to 10 parties.
I don't think they suck, but I am judging. I'm a DJ, so I am judging.
But I am asking this question because I want to I think that Jay-Z's lyrical content, the way he writes, like I'm an English teacher. I like reading Jay-Z's, he reads like poetry, right? American Gangster. I mean, there are allusions. I literally have been teaching poetry and Jay-Z song to help kids better understand the different ways that poetry is written, the different layers, the different literary devices that are used, the different allusions, and how those allusions make meaning even more meaningful. There's just so rich in all that stuff that I do with Jay-Z on layers and layers because he's saying multiple things. And I get the complexity in Jay-Z that, you know, I mean, again, I don't go deep on Pusha T, but I'm talking about this album, right? Maybe it's an off album, maybe not, right? I've listened to some other stuff, but it's just, for me, it's like the writing content sometimes is so good that they're writing about more than just what they're writing about, right?
Exactly.
And because like the majority of the audience for most of these artists is white. Like Jay-Z, Pusha T, they have big, huge white corporate followings, right? Like hedge funds, people, bankers, right? They love gangster rap, right? So it's part of the conversation we're even having
Stay right there.
on that, like missing the point. Like this is not ever supposed to be authentic, right? Like
That's
in the
what
way
said, though. That's why he's talking about, like, why is it because I'm making particular kinds of art centered around a particular kind of experience within a particular kind of reality, right? Why does it have to? Why do I have to pretend? Like, why do I not get the same benefit of the doubt as other artists,
because there's no benefit in doubt. And when you understand that our reality was crafted for us by people looking at us as slaves, then mimicking us as slaves.
He said that in songs, though.
So now I'm gonna get out. Now that I know that I'm in a box, let me get out the box. Not, I'm in the box. Let's stay in the box and party.
I don't think. Yeah, and see, this is the thing.
Stay in the box and party.
The thing between me and you, I don't think that's what's happening. I don't like. I don't. That's not the energy I'm getting.
We in trouble. I think I do is like you have to, like, you're an exception to the rule, and we're all here. Everybody here is an exceptional person.
What you trying to say? What I do?
Where we come from, the environments we come from, the investment that was put in us for us to transcend our environment is because we're exceptions to the rule. Right. So the rule is what we see in our community on a daily basis. The rule is following what we're talking about. It's not you and I. We have the ability to break down, discern, look a little deeper. But the average person that comes from they're not taking it that deep. It's just their anthem for the life that they live. I'm going to live my life and I need theme music. And Pusha's my theme music. Why is Pusha my theme music? Because I'm living that Pusha life. That's why Pusha T is my theme music. And that life right there is what's got our community in a box.
Yeah, but see, I'm saying it was the clips that I'm on international television.
No, mind you, the first time I met the clips, the first time I met the clips was in a studio session with Pharrell. I took Benny Boom there, and then they came to Club Envy. I was a promoter at Club Envy. And Benny had to remind me, you don't remember when they first went to Club Envy? They were shook. They were scared to death. You had these young Virginia boys in New York with these, and they was like, and then you reflect and you go, yeah, it's just rappers. They just rappers. I seen people right next to me, my people sell crack, right next to me. My family members. They was going over, bringing back, all that. I'm just a rapper. I'm from the street. I'm not street, but I'll write you a nice story about it.
You know something? We're gonna end up having to come back on this one again because, I know we're about to go into another segment, but something that you mentioned earlier, we need to put some more focus on is the people who are telling the artist what to do and what to say and what to rap about.
Right. Yes.
Like we really, really need to get into that because that's the mind control.
That's where the war is actually at. Like
right,
Jay-Z, for these are pawns. I'm a pawn. Like I just choose to be a pawn.
For
the team over here.
So how do we explain the King Disease album being the first time Nas wins? You think that's a what? I want to know because
I know we're I don't want to start a new subject. I just want to Larry Ham, I love the conversations he has when he joins us in Conversations on Hip Hop. That's why I wanted to make sure he was on to hear this and transition and have this conversation, transition to what he's talking about. Also, everybody who's on can stay on because I love the interaction. When Larry Ham starts talking, or when he gets into the stuff he's talking about, there's a great energy and interaction that he enjoys. We enjoy, but getting all this stuff together, I think there's so much richness to that. Larry Ham, you were hearing a lot of the conversation that was being
Man,
talked
the conversation was deep. It's too deep for me. It's beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, okay. All right. Chairman Lawrence Ham of the Chairman of the People's
Did he really just try to play with us like that,
Progress.
He just said we saying something above his pay grade?
Right. And that's why I said we have Larry Ham on, Lawrence Ham on, who's the chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, legendary organization that's been close to 40 years, meeting every single week and pushing on every social issue that affects our community in very practical, real ways of trying to find solutions to our problems. So that's as an introduction to who Larry Ham is. We are always, always, always honored just to have him on our show because of the depth of the stuff that you have done and continue to do, right? That has affected positively the lives, and I'm not exaggerating, I believe the lives of millions of people around the country based on the work that you have done, both in New Jersey and around the country since you were like 12, like literally about 16 years old, right?
Well,
So, and then the 16 is the 12 was an exaggeration, the 16 was not. So when you're talking about art and artists and you're talking about like how do you see it from your perspective from someone like Pusha T or drill music, or the ways in which some of the more some of the music, right? Some of the music that like I don't want to. I don't want to just put
How
it.
You gonna
all
put drill music and Pusha T to sing? This is what I'm talking. We should stop it.
So what is your take on it? And then let's talk, and then let's go into what we're here for, which is to tell us more about, to bring us back more, because we're going to want to have you back to talk even more about 50 years in Gary. So what do you think about this conversation? Because what you're a history teacher, you're a historian by training, and you're always putting things together. I really want to hear your take on this.
Well, I thought the discussion was fascinating. And what has struck me about the discussion about rap music in recent weeks, and perhaps a couple of months, there seems to be a kind of critique going on that, I have previously not heard, not openly. I think this critique has always been going on in a subterranean way. But, I'm on social media just like everybody else. I'm looking at Instagram, I'm looking at Facebook, Twitter. Instagram in particular seems to have more rap related stuff. And what has really been surprising me is how people are beginning. Now, I haven't seen references to particular hip hop artists or rap artists, but there really seems to be an anti-capitalist critique taking shape, and the fellas that are on tonight have been moving in that direction. But some of the stuff I've seen on Instagram, has just amazed me, because people have always, everything has positives and negatives. Larry Ham has positives and negatives. Rap music has positives and negatives. But now it seems that the critique is taking on a real kind of political economic dimension, whereas people are connecting the whole rap style, the whole cultural lifestyle, to that of the capitalist class. And I had not seen this kind of critique previously. And I'm seeing more and more, stuff pop up on Instagram like that. I don't know the particular origins of it, but I certainly welcome it. American, all aspects of American culture are subject to critique. It's not just rap music. Rap music is just one aspect of the totality of American culture. And, I think if we wanted to use a kind of macro, broad brush approach, most of the culture reinforces the economic system. I mean, that's why you see such a distinction between American music and music in other countries. Whereas the music in many other countries, not all countries, but in many other countries, the music is more faceted and doesn't just deal with money, power, respect, guns, drugs, women, sex. The other music in other countries deals with aspects of life that people are living, and even resistance. I mean, how come we can't point to, maybe with the exception of Gil Scott-Heron, but Gil Scott-Heron, whose birthday we just passed, the anniversary, he never reached, one of his songs, out of the many albums that he did, and I think he did 20 albums, maybe more than that, but he only had one song, The Bottle, that really reached the charts, so to speak. So a lot of his music was underground, was subterranean, was a niche music that particularly college students like myself, found spiritual reinforcement. And I mean, it hadn't been for Gil Scott-Heron and Bob Marley, I don't know that I would have graduated from college. But the point I was trying to make is that in the post-Black Power era, how come we don't have a figure, an African-American figure comparable to a Bob Marley, who made a whole lot of music about a lot of different aspects of life, but his music was in the genre of a resistance kind of music. Get up, stand up for your rights, chase them crazy bald heads out of town, and on and on and on. So let me shut up. The brothers have to say.
I would say KRS-One is today's Bob Marley.
Okay, but see, okay, I accept that. I'll leave it right there.
Yeah, not as commercially big.
Well, that was the point I was trying to make. Even KRS-One.
The real answer is not
commercial success of a Bob Marley. But go ahead. But I accept what you're saying anyway.
The real answer is Nas.
KRS is an icon and a hero. Yes.
The real answer is Nas.
Explain.
If you need somebody commercially successful with a kind of hegemonic message.
Bob Marley wasn't really commercially successful as much as his core audience was just so huge that, like, he was Grateful. He was on tour Grateful Dead, and like he wasn't, who was the Commodores? I mean, not even the Commodores. That was still an R&B underground.
Right.
He was like pop in '78.
Rick James.
Not even like.
See, that's the thing.
Dion. We're talking about Dion. Like,
see, you mean that step, like pop style?
You know what?
Nas is pop.
See, you know what?
Pop.
You know what, Hakeem? I finally understand what your point is. I've been trying to figure you out for the last, 3 weeks. I've been trying to figure you out. Then I got it now. I think what my consciousness hears you say is this. I think that what Professor Ham is saying and what you're saying and what I think everybody is saying, you got to be. Nas got a song called "Woo for the Children." He's like, you got to be a special kind of person to feel what I write. The reality of why Bob Marley was such a big cultural figure was because Larry Hamm existed. And your argument is, given the small amounts of Larry Hamms or DJ Rhinos or Jonathan Alstons, that we have to have a more pointed, direct, overt, kind of hegemonic message to counteract the large-scale miseducation of the masses.
Yes. Thank you. Boom.
Yeah.
Like, exactly. There was a point in my life where I had to make a choice. Like, I had a very close family member who had it bubbling, and I could have been right there.
Mm-hmm.
But over here, it was TJ, Rodney, it was Act Now, it was, you had to make a choice. And for all my friends that made a choice to go that way, I see where they are 30 years from now or 30 years from then. And I see where my friends over here that made this choice, I see where they are. So I'm thinking, okay, as a community, how can we get more of our people to make this choice over here? And a lot of it has to do with just cultural norms, lifestyle, just what we do on a daily. A lot of the things that we pick up on is just what's around us on a daily.
Right. Now, what you just said right there, now I can connect that with what Chris was saying, because just as what Brother Hamm was saying, like his people, the ones that put him on was Gil Scott, Bob Marley. The ones that put me on was Chuck D, and KRS. The ones that put Chris on was 50 and Pusha T. You know what I'm saying? So it's really about who speaks to you. Who speaks to you? You know what I'm saying? Like if 50 and Pusha didn't touch me like it touched Chris, that could be a generational thing or whatever. It doesn't even necessarily have to be that we're from different backgrounds, because we could both be from some serious poverty, but those people could be speaking to Chris more than they could speak to me. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but you have to factor in. You got to factor in, right? There was a time before 1996 where you could not say certain things on the radio.
Right.
You couldn't play music from the same artist so many times within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
They took that away so you could program the nation on one accord. That destroyed regional music. It destroyed the variety of messages that we were getting. That's something that's targeted and deliberate. Targeted, and so why we like 50 Cent so much has a lot to do with because he was on the radio 1,000 times.
It has everything to do with KRS. He said KRS-One was his favorite rapper.
Right, because 50 grew up in a time where the rules at radio still allowed for certain voices. Like you couldn't say the B word, you couldn't say the N word, you couldn't cuss all day, you couldn't openly talk about drug use, you couldn't talk about murdering people on mainstream radio. Like, yeah, you can get played Friday nights on the weekends. You can't, kids aren't waking up 7:30 in the morning and go to school and hearing, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna shoot you, that is not a part of your reality. So you don't even, if you heard it, you wouldn't like it. Not because it's good or not good. It's because it's not a part of your reality.
Watch this. Professor
and that goes back to who's making the decisions to let these things go. Who's giving these things a pass?
Right.
Because I remember that. I remember when I started hearing stuff on, where I'll never forget when I first started hearing rappers actually saying that they're selling crack and they're letting the word crack go, like they're not bleeping it out or nothing. They just the national anthem. They're playing that on the radio. I'll never forget that.
The national anthem in 1998, I think. Junior Mafia, FBs get money, FNs get money. You got babies going to school listening to this. And you gonna rock with it because it's catchy.
Even before that, man, the Chronic.
The Chronic.
But, you know what I mean? You know what that was?
It's
and that was right in the middle of Public Enemy, Ice Cube, and Sister Soldier days. That was right in the smack in the middle of those days, man. When Cube, Chuck D, and Sister Soldier were on top of their game, and then all of a sudden, bam, you got the Chronic and shut all of that down. That was the end. That was the end of that conscious era. The conscious era was like about 5 years, and it ended right there.
Now see, this is where it gets weird. See, this is, and right there. See, I'm with you all 90%, but it's just the 10% right here. Professor Ham, you there? Mr.
Yeah,
Austin,
I'm right here. I'm listening.
Mr. Austin, can you fix the screen so I can see everybody? I don't know what that is. I can't. It's weird when I'm like.
It's talk because it plays better. Just So what you're saying.
Professor Ham, listen. Now this is what I mean when I say the clips. This song. I was in my room. I will never forget. I was in my room with earphones on, in tears. I was laying literally on my bed in tears. Mind you, got a mother that's in the Black Panther Party. Had a dad who was a Mason, but he had passed away when I was like 3.5. But now I'm like 15. I'm outside. I can go outside. I'm outside. And there's certain things happening in my life that I'm participating in or not, and a certain thing. But I'm in my room. I'm crying. This was when I say that I grew up with the Clips and Pusha T. This is what I meant. This is what I meant when I said it was the most. This was the song. And he says, rappers is talking to me as if we in the same boat. I tell them quick, no, I move coke. And you and I don't share no common bond. So forgive me if I don't receive you with open arms. It shames me to no end to feed poison to those who could very well be my kin. But where there is demand, someone will supply. So I feed them their needs at the same time cry. Yes, it pains me to see them need this. All of them lost souls, and I'm their Jesus. Deepest regret and sympathy to the streets. I see them pay for their fix when their kids couldn't eat. And with this in mind, I still didn't quit. And that's how I know that I ain't. My heart bleeds, but aside from the fact I live for my kids and theirs and them youngins after that.
Most of the people that hear that take reverence in being and not being. I know I ain't here. They're bishop. Like you want to be bishop in the Jews. I don't care about myself, so you know I don't care about you. How many brothers identify with Bishop and let his message reinforce their lives as opposed to Omar Epps' character?
Q, yeah.
Even though Q's the hero in the movie, Bishop is the star.
Because be clear,
coming out of New Jack City,
I'm sitting there.
He gave you Bishop.
I'm sitting there on the bed, and I'm thinking to myself, at what point do I want to be in a reflective mindset at some point in time, which could be today, stuck being with the emotions that attach you to make, and the delivery on that is a very heart-wrenching song.
But and I think that maybe the difference in a lot of this is the frequency, radio, airplay. Like I think they're talking about two different things. I think you're talking
at the time
about,
this was the biggest group in hip hop.
Right, but I think that's their point, right?
Was that their biggest record?
No.
That's the point.
But You Must Learn ain't KRS-One biggest record either.
At the time it was.
And everybody knows that lyric.
At the time it was. No, you understand. At the time, You Must Learn, when it dropped, was the biggest record Chris had out at the time.
With the video and
the after school program we created, Act Now, in 1990, the first class starts with the video You Must Learn.
I want to go to I know I do want to have this conversation again and have the three of you back continuing.
So basically y'all saying if it's not the single, we don't care. I just want to make sure I got this right.
I think what we're saying is it's people at the record label that's not Pusha T who decide his imaging. No. I'm saying is the way he's presented to us, packaged to us, sold to us, even though that record's on his album, that's not the highlight on the album. As per the label. And there's a reason why they're not focused on that messaging.
They got the album cover is a picture of them two in a 1965 Cadillac DeVille with a black Jesus in the back seat.
You miss it. I'm talking about the overall push, the presentation, the way your imaging is, the way you carry yourself, what you project. Even though, in my opinion, Ready to Die is a conscious album, yes, Biggie's not looked at as a conscious artist, and I understand that.
Neither is Push, and I'm saying I think the people who label those people who don't hear that consciousness, that's their problem, and that's
no. The problem is that the people at the record label spending the money put money behind the images they want us to absorb. It's called target marketing. They identify the target group, the age group, the gender, and then they specifically send messages to that. Like Little Kim, I'm sure, has a positive message in her music, but when you think Little Kim, you think of the girl standing there with her legs open.
And I think maybe the perspective is like when I've been having a similar conversation with my students and the music that they listen to in this in the last part of their senior year in a creative writing class. We talk about hip hop. We talk about the music they listen to. We talk about lyrics. We talk about poetry. We talk about it because, I believe that hip hop is I think for thousands of years, we defined ourselves through our poetry, right? Like it's the center of our discussion. It's the center of our culture. And with music and lyrics, and especially with hip hop, I don't think it's any different, right?
But I think what's been fascinating about this discussion that we've been having, although people aren't using the word, but they are using words that describe the economic system, and that is the impact of capitalism on the music industry, the impact of the for-profit economic system. I mean, what Hakim was talking about, target marketing, niche, all of that's capitalist production. And the end result or the end goal is the maximization of profit, and it's what sells, what makes money. The things that are successful are the things that get repeated. I don't know if any of you guys are thinking about doing or have done, thinking about getting other advanced degrees if you have one already, but it would be fascinating for someone to do a master's dissertation or a doctoral dissertation on the impact of capitalist production on the hip hop music industry. Mm-hmm. I think some people would be fascinated by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I encourage everyone to listen to my latest project, Nah Mean?
Oh yeah, you already know. I got it.
Where do I can I stream it somewhere, or where do I go to find it?
Yeah, it's everywhere. But I'm gonna send you the link on Facebook to the whole project. 5 songs, it's an EP, 2 songs each 2 verses each song. New York rap, Now and Then, Love and Hip Hop, Son of God, Can I Eat? Well, Rhino, what you feeling?
If ain't no coke on there, I'm not listening.
I'm feeling all of them, man. But recently, I've been listening to Can I Eat?
Right.
Could I ask one more question? I know we're coming to the end,
sir.
But I want to ask the brothers, all 3. Well, you too, Jonathan. All 4. Oh my God. What's the group that Sister Soldier was working with? I'm having a senior moment.
Public Enemy.
Now, Public Enemy was commercially successful. How do we explain? Because Hakim, you mentioned this a few minutes ago, that they were at the top of their game, and then all of a sudden, it seems like a switch was made. So I was raising this question of capitalism and how things that are profitable are pushed. I'm presuming that Public Enemy was commercially successful. So how do you explain the fact that a commercially successful group was in fact, let go by the industry?
Can I take around this bush right here? So I went to summer camp every year from 1978 to 1987.
Is this the right one?
And when I first started going to camp.
Hey, Hop, sorry to interrupt. Is this the album cover?
I can't see it.
Is it NAHMEAN?
Yes, that's it. Not me.
New York rap now and then, love and hip hop. Son of God, can I eat?
Yep, that's it.
I'm listening to it on the Black streaming app. As soon as we hang up, I got you.
All right, got you, my man. So went to summer camp for 10 years. When I first started going to summer camp, white campers, white folks was not interested in rap music, hip hop, nothing black. It was jungle music. Get that out of here. Democracy rules. We outvote you. You can't play that in the cabin. Right. When Run DMC hit, it all changed. And largely because Rick Rubin, coming from the punk rock world, matched up with Russell Simmons, provided a sound that was palatable to the white ear at the time. Now, children in general, but white kids love rebellion. They love to go against their parents, right? Public Enemy, by the time we get to Public Enemy, who still had that upbeat, renegade, rebel sound, like metal sound, but hip hop, represented as rebellious as you could get in America in 1987, 88. So white kids just latched onto it, hook, line, and sinker, right? Now that influenced the messaging in music across the board to change. Now you got all these artists talking about consciousness and revolution and, Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam and, until we get to the Million Man March. And we've seen the effect that hip hop had on Black people with the Million Man March. Mm-hmm. What we see after the Million Man March is the change in Black music.
Wow.
We're going to consciousness to know what we're going to focus in on this gangster rap. That's going to supply our young teens with the rebellious fix they need, is mimicking these young Black drug dealers who are anti-society, but through selling drugs, nihilistic behavior, destructive behavior. We start making money we've never seen before, and we stay right there in the box they created for us.
And I think maybe that's
right. So
that's
what that is.
issue,
So
right?
what that is. Yeah, that's capitalism matched or added on to it is white supremacy. You throw the white supremacy on with capitalism, and then you have what we have and what we're dealing with.
Why it's so acceptable to, and I think that when you're talking about this, and I think really the discussion isn't really about individual artists as much as it is the whole ethos of what my students listen to and how all of them, right? Like, and I don't mean all as in all, but I mean all as in a lot, right? As in all of them have vibe to, like, I would think it's not an exaggeration to think that every one of my students who is into hip hop has vibed to albums or vibed to songs that have celebrated our death in some way, right? Like, and I would say that, and that's just based on the discussions that we're having, that at some point, right, like it is so central to a lot of what is listened to, whether it's Future, who's doing it not with the lyrics but with the beat. They'll describe the beat, but he's talking about drugs and dealing. I mean, the concept, right? And it's in so much of the music. Like, I'm not saying that the music is the cause, because it's not, but I think that there's a difference between the types of like programming that people have, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Public Enemy got replaced. Right. I don't think it's a coincidence that Public Enemy was huge, and then all of a sudden, right, you have gangster rap coming right after it, and having longer staying power, right? And I'm someone who likes Jay-Z a lot. I think Jay-Z is an artist. I think Jay-Z, his writing in and of itself is brilliant. I don't think he's just pro-capitalist. I think he's complicated pro-capitalist. I think that, reasonable doubt, he's almost on every song that I hear from Jay-Z. He's like,
yeah, because he would say something like, "I don't know, Mr. Austin. I'm Che Guevara with bling on. I'm complex."
Yeah, Che wouldn't have bling on. That's ignorant. I got a song. I jacked that whole joint, and I addressed that. That's what I'm saying, bro. When you get into my music, bro, you're gonna be like, "Yeah, he really said that." All the things that are missing over here.
Hey, I just told you, you the Michelin star chef that goes to the restaurant and say it sucks. I don't want you at my restaurant. You can't come. No, no. If you're gonna say Chris Randall, you're not a good activist, because look at Zaid Muhammad and Larry Ham. Well, I suck. Thanks. Congratulations. Good job. My contribution to the black community is not Zaid Muhammad or Larry Ham. I might well go home. Let me just go home. I
thank you, Chris Randall. I'll put you on mute in a second. But I appreciate like this conversation about music and culture. That's why Larry Ham, I was like, I want you absolutely.
Yeah. I want to ask this question. In 1982, Larry Ham, what were the 45, 50-year-olds saying about the message?
Nobody thought the message.
To be quite frank,
everybody loved the message.
Yeah, true. They did.
Yeah. People in the 80s, because that's when I just got back from school, right? I was back home. And the popular stance toward rap music was pretty positive overall. You know, even like the Hotel Motel Holiday, I think nobody was talking about killing anybody on there, you know. But the message and the other groups, X-Clan, Public Enemy, overall, the 40 and 50-year-olds were positive. I remember the first time. How old was I then when I got home from school? I think I was 26. When I got back home from graduate school, I was 26 years old. I mean, I couldn't get enough of KRS-One and X-Clan, you know, and Public Enemy, you know, was like, to me, it was like abstract. You know, it was like the height of artistic view. It was like abstract music, you know. But it changed. Go ahead, man.
No, I said, don't believe the hype.
Don't believe the hype. You know, I'm telling you, most folks were not negative toward rap music in the early years, because in its early years, it was a resistance music. Right. And it was a music that came out of the people. Yeah. I mean, that's what's really amazing about hip hop. I mean, we don't have to do a whole lot of research to know it came out of the hood. Mm-hmm. And people were positively inclined toward that, you know. I mean, another example might be if we were to counterpose, you know, American hip hop, say to, in terms of its commercial appeal, say to Fela Kuti. Mm. Now, Fela Kuti in Nigeria, he was like the Michael Jackson of Nigeria, you know, Fela. Yeah. But all his music was resistant. His music was so much resistant that the government went after him. Mm-hmm. You know, I think they killed his mother. They threw his mother out the window.
They killed his mother.
Right.
Yeah, Sarah, we were, yeah.
So, you know, and I'm just saying that the only thing I'm saying is, you know, music, you know, these things exist independent of us. How I feel is not going to necessarily change the music industry, but as a human being, I can still, you know, have a perspective and opinion on things. I just think that today there's a desperate need for some resistance music. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to know if I could share a little piece.
Absolutely. What I was going to even say is that we need to have a show just with you and the album and talking about it in a way that we normally can't do because we get taken off the air for copyright reasons. But for you, that wouldn't apply.
Yeah, I mean, listen. The Michelin star restaurant is open every day. Okay, it's all good. Listen, hey, Jonathan Austin. The next time there's a protest where the police is working for Zaid Muhammad, I will not be attending because I ain't good enough because I'm not Larry. That's what I'm gonna go with. I'm just saying I would have came.
Stop it!
Wow.
I would have came, but I'm not Larry Ham.
So we want to make sure that we know we're ending. We're getting in the last part of the segment of this. We're really of the program, right? And I know that we bled over because we wanted to do more on Gary, right? But I know that with Larry
next week
during the conversation, and you were like, "Oh, this is great." So I keep saying that it's an honor every time we have you on. It's an honor every time we talk.
Thank you, brother. Real quick. Let me get something in real quick before Hakeem do his piece. I remember back in the 90s, there was a birthday party for Amiri Baraka at the Legal Communication Center. You know, that building across the street from Penn Station. There used to be a restaurant in there, and they had a set for Amiri. And Amiri was reading that night. And one of the things he said that I would never forget. Tell the story. What's the name of the anti-slavery?
Somebody blew up America.
No. The anti-slavery. Damn, I'm having so many problems tonight. The anti-slavery piece that was written in the 19th century.
David Walker's Appeal.
David Walker's Appeal.
Yes, thank you. Amiri Baraka was reading that night, and if you know the story of David Walker's Appeal,
1829.
Right. David Walker's Appeal was outlawed. Like, if you got caught with a copy of David Walker's Appeal, because it was an appeal by a black man to armed insurrection against slavery. Right. Amiri Baraka said that night, he said he wanted to write a poem that would be outlawed, like that would be so dangerous that it would be outlawed, like David Walker's Appeal.
And then the poem he wrote was
Somebody Blew Up America. I'm sorry, I can't go ahead, man.
Nah, it's all good. Get them jewels. The only pimp I know is how to pimp the system. Time to eat food, I lay up in the kitchen. Oh, excuse me, that's the wrong one. If pimping ain't easy, what is revolution? Rappers be spitting straight noise pollution. Here's a clean glass of water, I'll show you how to eat to live. What goes around comes, let me show you how to give. That's something that you hear when the 9 is at your rib. In the street, tuck your jewels, thugs drool like baby bibs. I try to be mindful, write something for the kids, talking like I walk it, rap it how I live. I came up blue collar, strive to be a scholar, but I couldn't eat the love, I nearly starved without the dollar. The pressure and the stress is enough to make you holler when the landlord's at your doorstep and the devil's on your collar. They call me a slacker because I won't sell crack for the cracker. I call women queens and I love to bury blacker. Some chicks get it twisted, they'd rather be called with they in the air like everybody's supposed to kiss it. It's a simple lesson, you get what you deserve. Is life or just a pimp with a perm? Seeing mommy tricked out made a little heartburn, but it's something she'll forget when it's time to take her turn. When will the children learn it's much better to earn, but when my just put in work, they like to make the metal burn. End up in the system, it's all systematic. Manchurian candidates waving automatics. A product of a project launched in the 80s. Chemical warfare meant to kill the crack babies. Now as the world turns, is it just a story? Because keeping it real got my sons in purgatory. In between heaven and Hades, like earthquakes in Haiti, the fat lady clears her throat and plays harp for the babies. They say I'm such a mystic, lyrics something mythic, but I make it so plain with details and specific. I'm just gifted. I'm young and I'm black. Some represent the game. I represent the fact that God helps those who helps themselves. So when God helps you, he's really helping himself. Make every day have purpose is the science of life. Every breath's another roll. There's a science to dice. Learn from your mistakes. Try to learn from others. You'll get one roll at life. You won't get another. You have to learn the tricks because be on the gaff. On some funny business, but that's gonna make you laugh. I thought he had the bread. Was it wonder, not the weed? I'm wondering how it's coming back because my connect ain't getting beat. That's jewelry.
Yeah.
Jerry Blacker, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Salute.
Right.
Salute.
And we definitely have to come back and talk more.
Everybody, the Michelin star restaurant is open. Michelin star restaurant. Hey, DJ Rhino. So since we talking, so I got a Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad reference. I got all these different things happening. I don't remember him mentioning that he was talking about those two at any point. I don't know who the colored folks. I'm too dumb to know any of that. I just don't know none of that. The conversation you're referencing is when Elijah Muhammad is teaching Malcolm X how to preach, and he said, "You don't need to beat our people down. Well, they tell them that they have a dirty glass, you present a clean glass of water, they'll choose it." That's from the autobiography of Malcolm X, right?
Yeah, here's the clean glass of water. I'll show you how to eat to live. What goes around comes. Let me show you how to give.
Eat to live, right? That's one of Elijah Muhammad's books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but you didn't tell me that, so obviously,
because when you see when you watch the video, it's green screen. I'll send it to you. The jewelry video, you'll see the green screen of Elijah Muhammad, How to Eat to Live, that I referenced in the song. You do a video, and you spell it out.
And also,
Yeah, if I should happen to catch you, with the video, sure. But if I put that in my earphones and I don't read any books,
well, hopefully these young folks will have a wonderful teacher like Mr. Chris Randall to fill in the gaps.
I did. Matter of fact, I taught kids about Amir Baraka when they had Jonathan Austin as their teacher, and they didn't know who they were. And I'm not even from New Jersey.
Oh, wow. Love you, Chris. That's why I always got to say whenever he's like, I was like, we actually friends though.
That's actually a true story too.
Wow. So that is true. There were some kids who did not know.
The only thing I want to say,
these arguments. But
one thing I really want to say though is that the thing about you, Hakim, and I think that the question that you were talking about, Professor Ham, about niche music, and the reality is, the reason I loved Jay-Z is because he was saying things that I had to go figure out what he was saying.
Yes.
Same thing with Public Enemy for me.
Yeah, I love like when he's talking about the oil spill that BP ain't clean up. I'm anti-Santa Maria. Only Christopher we acknowledge is Wallace. And I had to wear that because that's my name, Christopher. You not to wear that one. So I'm saying, oil spill BP. What's he trying to say? And the song is called Oceans. And he's talking about the slave trade.
But I think that is the point that Hakim's making, right? Like you don't like, and although the point I'm making is that the role of poetry is so that we do that. That's always been the role of poetry.
Right. So when Push say at the top of the pyramid is a.
I think the difference is you see it in Push, but we read we're listening to this album, and in this album,
yes,
it ain't
as
deep as the other. The one we was talking about, like, hey, my Coke is better than yours, right? Like that's there too.
So do this.
That's there too.
Great. So Jay-Z is just money, cash, hoes, and let's write them off.
No, because in every single
until 444, yeah.
Well, and I push back on that, right? like I push back on that, Hakim, right? I will defend the layers of Jay-Z.
It's disingenuous.
Like he is not like Jay-Z is not Public Enemy, but he also in his poetry, in his music, in his lyrics, he acknowledges that this part of a game. It's a critique of capitalism. Now, you can't listen to American
all I know is that I was trying to get people to join the campaign to free Black political prisoners and prisoners of war.
That's right.
Trying to come to pop meetings and trying to get my friends to come. But the soundtrack of life that we were listening to was different, and I couldn't. That's it.
And that's the argument, and that's legit, right? Because I think you're making a structural argument about music and what we listen to and how we have access to those messages that we could take apart, like Public Enemy. Taking apart that message is fundamentally different than Jay-Z or Pusha T. I like Jay-Z because I'm an English teacher and he's just a talented poet. He is layered on levels, and I would love to break down any of his music. He's good, right?
We needed we made a song called Free Mumia.
Yes,
because we really needed to free Mumia.
That's right.
We still need to free.
That's
Mumia.
right.
When I think about the most important things in our community,
$1 million.
No. Let's not go there. Let's not, because it's making light of the real problem in our community. Which is that we're not focused on our community. Right. We're focused on what outsiders think is of value in our community. And you have people who play to their interest. I'm not saying that Jay-Z doesn't have layers and that Pusha T doesn't say, I'm saying they've been used as a tool for our community's destruction, and I've watched it happen. Like, I remember my friend Rain sending me this FBI document that was released in 2006 under the Freedom of Information Act that detailed the FBI's investigation of death row from its inception all the way past the Pac and Biggie murders. Right now, in the email I'm reading, they talk about how a safe house was set up on Eaton Place in East Orange, New Jersey, and the whole death row operation was a money laundering operation, getting birds from California at 13, selling them out of East Orange, New Jersey for 18 to the surrounding areas. They talked about how the expansion of the Bloods at this point blew up. And then as I'm reading, I'm reading about the barbecues that I used to throw on 19th Street at Miss Jackson's house that we shot the Madism video in, that the FBI was in, just sitting there. And I'm talking about that's how serious it is.
Yeah.
Man, that's deep.
We're being watched by the. It's me.
They were kids then. You hear what I'm saying?
We were kids, children. Like I was the Sharif on the block. I'm the guy, yo, y'all messing up the hood. Y'all messing up. Yo, y'all need to take that somewhere else. Why y'all selling crack? Yo, oh, Hakeem, get out of here with that. Shut up. You don't understand. Dude, what you mean understand? We slept in the same bed. What you mean I understand? We went to the same schools, the same problems, issues you had, I have. There's a choice. We either gonna move the community forward or we're gonna move the community backwards. These knuckleheads chose the community to move the community backwards. Not everybody got caught up in it. Some people escaped it. Some people made money and did what they. Not everybody became a drug addict or got locked up or got murdered. Not everybody. But the effect of the community in East Orange, New Jersey, as it stands now, because of the nonsense and the soundtrack.
Man, you need to write a book, brother. That's what I was saying.
I know the chairman, Larry Ham, ain't telling nobody they need to write a book.
Of course I am.
Lord,
by the way, Chris.
Do as I say. Do as I say, not as I do.
Waiting for it to come out.
I'm the chief hypocrite.
His book is finally done.
The last meeting I attended with the campaign, you might have been there, Zaid.
Mm-hmm.
But I broke down in tears because I had just gotten my record deal, right? And I understood what I learned from this group of people and how important it was. And I knew what was being asked of me by the music industry and knew that I was going to have to sell my soul.
Wow.
I brought in tears. I was in tears because it was a joke. Oh, you gonna rap your way to freedom, brother? Oh, that's what you go. Oh, you a rapper now, Hakeem, huh? Or you gonna spit some bars? You gonna rap for revolution, right? That was like the little joke inside our inner circle. And then things kind of happened the way they happened, and it was a struggle for me to maintain that sense of myself and still achieve success within the music industry. And you sacrifice. It's just a sacrifice. It is. And that's me sacrificing, still holding on. There's a lot of people who don't know enough to sacrifice. And what's worse is people who know and it's like, you know what? I get this money, fellas.
Right. And that's a spot on criticism, right? Like that's
all over too.
Right.
But you know what was crazy? But you know what was crazy is I grew up kind of the same in a similar fashion. But I'm gonna tell you what happened. Let me tell you what happened. Hakeem, to let me know how real I know it is. We were trying to go to South Africa. I'm going to Rwanda next week, but we were trying to go to South Africa. We get visited at Science High School by a person. A beautiful black woman shows up and starts asking about debaters who had debated at the school a while back. Goes to, of course, you know, they sent a beautiful black woman to go talk to Jonathan Austin. You know what he did, right, Larry Ham? You know he cracked. You know he cracked, right? You know he told everything, right? He told everything cracked. Baba Zaid, if they send, CIA sent a beautiful black woman.
This police, tell a story.
Whoa.
Yeah, he cracked. You know he cracked. Told everything.
Yeah, I was like, yes, that's right. We dishing this debate.
It really was the CIA? It was really the CIA?
Let me finish what happened. So we everything is scheduled. We getting the shots. We got passed. Everything is ready to go. Then we get a letter from the State Department. It's like, on second thought, no, you good. We're not gonna let you. You're not gonna be able to go to South Africa and meet Desmond Tutu at this time.
Wow.
We're gonna need you to check back with us in a little while. You know, the climate ain't quite right for this. Right. So I know, and because my mother was in Canada and having, you know, FBI agents coming to the house and all that, I get it. I understand. The only thing that I wish that the art could be analyzed in a particular way is, I know that Hakeem, your criticism of me is correct. I am an anomaly, and I am reading a bunch of stuff. Like I just wrote down every lyric you just said. I just wrote it down, and I knew what you were saying, but it requires something of the listener.
Yes.
But I would say that the other thing we all need to be doing. Harold
we
Cruz,
all
come
agree.
on, Baba Zaid, help me out.
And-
Harold Cruz told us this in the Crisis of Negro Intellectual. Our job is also to articulate the culture to people who may not know.
Now we are running. We are running out of time. I know I want to give time for announcements. We're going to revisit
that's
this.
good
I think
conversation.
I think the story about the visit is a really good story because there were other things that happened that year. That was like our most successful year ever as a program, and we were definitely surveilled, right? And there were
Wow.
we were arguing arguments that were about race, that were structural, right? And part of the conversation was, yeah, we're critiquing these things, but so do the kids from Harvard Westlake. And it's not I knew I was having a conversation, which was a conversation of, are you training kids for violence? And my conversation was, these are intellectual ideas. Our kids grow up, they go to college, they are like the people who run critiques of capitalism best to me, like, were kids at Harvard Westlake who don't really that is not that most likely will not be their reality, right? Like, these are wealthy private schools, et cetera, that are talking about these things because they're ideas and they're important, and it's about education, right? And so it's a critical education. So, but I know that, like, I know something's out of whack, but I'm just like, you're giving me some information. It's not whatever. It is a thing, right? But at the same time, it's like, y'all don't have anything to worry about in terms of us blowing up anything right now. We're good. Like,
let me just say one thing before we get off on
Steve.
that point. Nadima,
Right,
ride with me with this, Nadima, right?
Mhm.
What happened to y'all with that visit was a consequence of the kind of stuff that Ademo and I did around Southern Africa, right? Crack was dropped on us in the 80s out of fear of our generation catching fire in a popular way. What our story that we were talking about, linking up with our people, trying to liberate what was left of the colonized African continent, particularly Southern Africa, because of its wealth and its resources, and it would have been a game changer for the entire African world. So they cracked us up. Right? Y'all was stepping into that. Innocent kids just dealing with, intellectual topics that are important. They were afraid of y'all becoming a part of what they were trying to prevent all of us from becoming.
Right.
Can I share? I know
international dimensions.
Diplomatically, the State Department diplomatically sending you a message that we watching y'all. We watching you, Negroes.
We want to give you the final words on this. Baba Zaid, Larry Ham, we want to give you the final words tonight because we know we are out of time. But I always enjoy these conversations. I always learn from you. Thank you, like Hakim, DJ Rhino, Chris Randall, Baba Zaid, Larry Ham, for these are conversations that need to be had. So thank you. But last words, Baba Zaid, Larry Ham.
Well,
Go
first,
ahead,
I just apologize for getting on late. I had to do some traveling. Had to hold on to one of my baby nieces who just graduated from college, and those kind of things are important to do even when you're busy as hell, like my crazy ass. I let everybody know I'm her crazy uncle. Don't come anywhere near if you ain't coming correct. Right. But I'm proud of that baby girl. And I'm sure the show was loaded. I just stumbled into this conversation with y'all, and whenever my little brother Hakim is here and Chris are here, I know this is, riding with Rhino. I know that's going to be a hot hip hop discussion. Rhino, I got some ideas for you. I'll share with you in a few minutes or two for some upcoming shows.
All right,
Larry.
This was a fascinating discussion tonight. I'm glad I was here. I'm glad I could listen, and I learned some things tonight. Made me think. I remember when the FBI came to my house in 1973 when I was living on 12th Street in Newark. I don't know if y'all noticed, but I was under indictment on a gun charge.
Oh wow!
In yeah, you don't know that part, right? I was on trial. I had been under grand jury investigation, was on trial, and what y'all was saying tonight just brought back all those memories. But Zaid is right. That anti-apartheid movement was a presage to the Black Lives Matter movement. And, you know, there has been some writing on it, but not nearly enough.
Not nearly enough.
But it was all over the country. And I'm sure that they were worried, you know. And what was funny is that they were making Pan-Africanists out of us, and we didn't even know it. Some of us didn't even know it,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because we were developing these direct links with the struggle in South Africa. So, yes, you know, every time there's a popular mass movement, they're going to try to destroy it, either through soft counterinsurgency methods or through hard counterinsurgency methods.
Mm-hmm.
You know, either through disinformation, infiltration, attempts to disrupt, destroy organizations. And if all else fails, they take out the gun and they kill people and they kill our leaders.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we will keep fighting. You know, this is but one phase of a long intergenerational relay race, you know, and each generation has to run their lap.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So after this discussion tonight, I feel good because I know we got some young leadership, you know, that's ready to fight.
Fight, goddammit.
Well, thank you much. We're glad to have you on. Thank our previous guest from the ACLU, and on the May 18th rally to make sure that our community doesn't get jacked again on the proceeds from cannabis. And thank you for the candidates that came on, or the candidate that came on today from the Newark West Ward, because we always believe in civil civic discourse. So until next week, also shout out to Ed Riley, Donna, everybody who's not here. So, you know, they're good. And well, so all that. Also, just, you know, prayers for the family of Wilhelmina Holder, activist.
Big loss.
Big loss to our community, longtime activist.
We're going to lift her up next week.
And yes, we will. And also shout out to my good friend, James Ballantyne, who lost a struggle with being sick. So many people know James.
Oh, really?
Yes, he passed away on Tuesday.
Oh, met him here.
Oh, man.
Met him here,
right.
Yes.
Right.
He's
He's younger
than
than me.
on with us.
Right. He was on the show with us only a few weeks. Right.
Wow.
So big prayers for him as well. So until next week, we'll see. All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio.
Go listen to Hakim Greene. Nah, I mean.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt, and you don't stop.